welcome to this episode 9 of the Lookout Sir 40k podcast. We're almost at 10, but not quite yet, so let's just concentrate on the fact that we made it to 9. Ain't we special? And when I talk about we, I talk about me. Not that I meant speaking rhymes all the times, but nonetheless, myself, Dan, and joined as ever by my good buddy, Philip. How's it going, pal?
Good evening, everyone. I'm good, thank you.
Have you had a productive period of time since last we did this?
I have built a Marauder bomber.
A Marauder bomber?
It's 90% complete.
Blimey. Did you do that the easy way, I assume? You just went onto the Forge World store, bought the official Marauder bomber, of which there is an official, Oh no, it's because you're converting it into the Destroyer, aren't you?
Oh, spoilers, but yeah.
Were we not supposed to talk about that?
Well, no, we can talk about it. I'm just building it for Richard, so he ordered it and got it delivered to my house, and I got to have the fun of building it, and then I won't have the fun of owning it. So, but we're going to be converting it to a Marauder Destroyer, or I've cleverly magnetised it all, so he can play it as both, basically.
Wow, there you go. That is an exceptional service that you're delivering to Richard there. Richard, of course, will be joining us next week. Not next week, next episode. So easy to fall into that trap. But yeah, he'll be joining us next episode to talk about his GT Heat-Free Army, which may or may not include that Marauder Bomber / Destroyer. But we'll worry about that when we get to it. In addition to good old Phil, we also have the spectacular, beautiful example of humanity that is Joe. How's it going, Joe?
I'm all right, thank you. I couldn't help but notice the sarcasm in your voice there, but I'll breeze over that.
Well, you moaned last time that I didn't give you enough of an introduction, and when you said to me, you said I'd like to just be referred to as a beautiful man. I thought, oh well.
Yeah, you can. Just got to put a bit of love into it, though. That's the thing. Make it sound real.
Oh man, there's too much love.
Oh, okay.
But by the way, when I was having that conversation, were you rattling things around in the background, much like you're doing right now?
Oh God, no! To assume that I would do anything other than sit here and stare blankly at a wall.
You're gonna have to listen back to this. It sounds like you're ferreting about the place in the background. Are you making noises unnecessarily?
No.
That must just be my imagination. Phil, did you hear anything, or is it just me?
It's totally him. It's always him. We know it. We just can't prove it.
We can't prove it, absolutely. I mean, I can, because I can see the audio feed when he does it, but let's leave that off the table.
It's all lies. It's all propaganda to get rid of me.
Potentially and replace you with the next person.
Yeah, exactly. That's it. You've got to watch yourself now, Joe, because you could well be replaced by our fourth guest, participant, that being the beautiful Tim.
Hello. Thank you for having me.
It's quite all right, Tim. It's quite all right. Obviously we've been teasing your arrival now for the last few episodes, so it only seems reasonable that we actually follow through and have you join us. Those of you who have taken the time to watch our rather awfully produced battle reports on YouTube might know Tim from playing Tyranids, because me and him played a game of Tyranids versus Blood Angels way back when. I say that was like 3 months ago. But yeah, how are you doing, Tim?
Yeah, I'm doing good, man. I'm doing good. Getting geared up for the GT as it's getting ever so close now.
Absolutely. I mean, you're an incredibly experienced tournament player, right, Tim? You're well prepped and prepared for what's to come, I'm sure.
Oh, yeah. I'm all ready to go. I've already got my case packed. I know exactly what I'm going to play. I know all my books, know all the codexes. I got this.
Really? Also, by the way, Tim, just for your reference, I'm going to say this in a live recording setting. Please don't swear.
Oh, sorry.
It's quite all right. Through the majesty of editing, no one will have heard the time that you said and equally they won't hear the time I said it either, because I will have edited all of that in a majestic way. Nonetheless, this is episode 9 of the Lookout Sir 40k podcast. Before I get into introducing the various topics, I do have a few things just to address quickly. So a couple of erratas from last week's episode. Joe was wrong on a handful of occasions when he talked about the orcs. Who would have thought it?
It was mainly the claw situation. So I wrongly assumed that the boss on the trike thing could take the special power claw, but he can't because he doesn't actually have a power claw. So I was wrong.
You were wrong, Joe. And also then on the topic of mistakes we made last time, the Chaos Space Marines within Blackstone Fortress are not, in fact, Emperor's Children Chaos Space Marines. They are of the Black Legion. So Phil will, of course, be eating his hat at some point for your pleasure. Obviously, trust us, he will definitely do that. Obviously, through the medium of a podcast, it's difficult to believe or see. But you promise, don't you, Phil, that you will definitely eat a hat at some point?
I did. I've got a nice selection. I've got a fedora. I've got like a military cap. I've got a top hat and a bowler hat. So people can, say which one they want, and I'll put some salt and ketchup on it maybe and give it a taste. However, I'm still convinced that they will be the next faction-specific, chaosy thing to come. I mean, Black Legion, which is obviously going to come now because those models are out. But I mean, one that's a bit more specific, because Black Legion is really isn't it not the chaos of many, but it's the all-encompassing sort of generic.
The smorgasbord.
Yeah, because they're not aligned to any one particular god, are they?
I basically trying to unionize. That's what it's all about.
Yeah, get them all together. Get all the lads.
Get all the lads together. Get the boys back together. And then obviously kill off all the weird clones of Horus and all the other things that took place after the Horus heresy.
Well, it's clearly worked. They've all had a good look, and they've looked under the sofas and under some pillows, and they found some thunderhammers. So they're doing well so far. Hopefully they maybe find some drop pods next time, or some.
I don't think they need drop pods anymore, mate. I mean, if this was still 7th edition, I would argue that probably was a necessity. But these days, I don't think Space Marines don't use drop pods. I mean, if anything, if they want to find a drop pod, they should look in a pre-owned bin in a game store, because they're everywhere.
Well, it's become canon now that Chaos have drop pods.
Well, there you go.
Thanks
How
to
lucky for
Black
them.
Library. So, from going from having access to one of the best transports into the game, they're now going to have access to the worst transport in the game, which I think is hilarious.
There you go. Lucky them. And then in addition to all of that Black Legion stuff, myself and Joe are going to be going to a doubles tournament next weekend. There's another weekend coming when this is released, but the weekend after that. So we look forward to telling you how that all went. There are no tickets available for it, right, Joe? It's all sold out.
Sorry, I muted myself because I'm eating, and apparently I'm not allowed to make any noise whatsoever.
Well, I mean, definitely not eating noises, Joe.
But all right, yes. So I'm ever the professional. I think there are no tickets available. I think we were like the last ones to squeeze in.
There you go. Where is the tournament though? Where's it taking place?
It's at a place
Brilliant.
near Southampton.
Oh, isn't it? Sorry, I remember now. You told me it's in Havant, which is actually near Portsmouth.
I don't know. I'm not on map. I'm not one.
Do you know who's organising the tournament, or is that just, that's not something that needs to be said either? I was hoping that we could kind of give them a nice plug about all the nice things.
Hang on, I'm bringing up my old look of face events thing.
Brilliant. I mean, between you and me, Joe, the levels of professionalism here is just going fantastic. I'm sorry, Tim.
Basically, it's at Attrition Gaming, in Eastleigh. It's nowhere near Havant.
Oh, right, okay, fine. So when you said Havant, you were just, off your head. Right, Eastleigh. That's a very different place. That's very near Southampton. So yes, okay, good. Everything makes sense once again. So we're going to that next weekend or weekend after next, or it'll be next weekend by the time you're listening to this. So there you go. So after that incredibly smooth introduction, probably the best we've ever done. What do you reckon, lads?
Oh, definitely.
There you go.
5 out of 10.
Beautiful. I mean, it's definitely the best introduction Tim's ever done.
Well, yeah, it's my only one, so it can only get better from here.
Well, there you go. Or worse, potentially.
Or worse, yeah.
It's all possible. So there you go. That was that. So let's talk about the things we're going to be talking about. As is no surprise to anybody, Blackstone Fortress is a thing, and we're going to mostly talk about that. So first and foremost, we're going to talk about the Blackstone Fortress game and the models that are within it. Obviously, none of us have been lucky enough to actually play the game, but Games Workshop has been nice enough to release a comprehensive Let's Play video that me and the guys have watched, and now we feel competent enough to say what we think about the systems overall, or at least give our first impressions based on what we saw and what we think might be the way the game pans out. We're also then going to talk about the models within that conversation as well, because we like broadly the models, so we'll probably pick a model we like the most and a model we like the least. Fun. And then once that bit's done, we're actually going to talk about the top 3 units from Blackstone Fortress. According to me, the top 3 units from Blackstone Fortress for use in Warhammer 40,000 8th edition. So that should be interesting. And then to close it all out, we're going to listen to Tim talk about his GT Heat-Free Army. And just for everyone's reference, because it's important to note that Tim is only here with us now for the introduction bit and the corresponding bit where he talks about his army. Is that cool, everybody?
Yes.
Wonderful, wonderful. Joe, the rustling during that whole thing was hugely appreciated. Let's throw in some transitional
I didn't
noises.
do any. Oh my god! This is a witch hunt. This is.
Let's throw in some transitional noises and get right on with it. So this is, as I said already, episode 9 of Lookout Sir. Thank you very much for checking us out. Hope you enjoy the show that is to come. Cheers, guys. Woo!
Right, so in this section, we're going to talk about the upcoming release of Blackstone Fortress, which we're all very excited about.
Warhammer Quest Blackstone Fortress.
Warhammer Quest Blackstone Fortress, which is very exciting, and it's setting the internet alight, not so much about the game, but the prospects of the future possible releases which it will bring upon us. So we're going to talk first about the models, because that's what it's all about, and our favourite models. And then Dan selected a few he likes and he dislikes, and we're just going to go from there, really. So I'm going to start with Phil. What is your favourite model?
So my favourite one is, and I've got to get this pronunciation correct, it's Espen Locarno, yeah. He's the Imperial Navigator. I sort of like him because he's got this weird hammerhead shark sort of hat on, which is somewhat interestingly because in the art book, like the Black Library, sorry, not the art book, the Black Library book that's coming out alongside it, on the art on the front cover has him in a different helmet than the big hammerhead hat. But I like his look. He's sort of quite interesting for a navigator. I assume they would be maybe a little bit more, I don't know, a bit abhuman. I mean, you can't see what he looks like because he's got a big helmet on. He might actually have a weird fish for a face.
He might have. I can only assume that he has the world's strongest neck, because that hat's not going to be very light.
Goes to the gym.
Yeah, and maybe like the hat's like an X-wing, so he's got casual mode and then attack mode. So the casual mode, it's all folded in behind him like a shark fin, helps him slice through corridors easily. And then as soon as enemies are aware, they just pop out, and he can use them to clothesline enemies.
And maybe, like a peacock, he uses it to attract a mate.
Or to scare people. He fluffers his feathers up really big.
Yeah, that's it. You know, he spreads out his ears, and then there you go. Lets the ladies know that it's time for business. Or to get away. Leave me alone. But what was I going to say? Yeah, well, also, if you actually look at the model, he's got quite a incredible series of kind of interlocked kind of neck braces almost there. So maybe that's how he maintains the weight of the whole thing. Maybe that's just an elaborate, bracing system to keep his neck from crumbling to dust under the weight of his navigator helmet.
Yeah, because navigators are in the books notorious for being frail and weak,
well, he's got a little
degenerating
staff.
people.
Obviously, that's to help him walk around. He's got some sort of spindly tubes that go into his body at various points. He's got a little, kind of like a cool power pack with a purity seal on it. And actually, I didn't even realise this until now, looking at the 360 model, that he's got a really cool detail on the back of his cape. He's got like I'm trying to think what they're called, the laurels, like the wreath with a skull, and then these 3 little diamonds, obviously represent the 3 eyes that he's got. And then the middle one's got a little dot in because it's the special third eye.
The third eye of the navigator. He also gives off a little bit of a pilot vibe from Farscape, if anyone remembers that program.
Oh yeah. Wasn't the pilot the guy who levitated by farting?
No, that was Rigel. Rigel also has a bit of that going on as well, but the pilot was that gigantic, like multi-limbed. He had like little crab pincer type things, and a very similar kind of massive head like the Navigator does. So yeah, similar kind of vibe to Pilot from Farscape there.
I got the Rocketeer. Did you ever see that Disney movie?
I did, yeah. Was it a Disney movie, The Rocketeer?
Yeah, it was. Yeah, and it was a big flop. But that's digressing.
I thought it was actually quite a good movie, wasn't it?
Oh, it was great. I loved it. I think it came out the same year. I can't remember which movie. A big release came out, so it didn't do very well.
Jurassic Park.
But no, that could have been actually. But the fin that went back, which allowed him to like turn as he flew, looks basically like they've stuck two of them together to form his hammerhead helmet.
He's a mess of references, is basically what we're coming to the conclusion of.
Because the eyes and the mouthpiece looks a lot like Star-Lord's mask as well.
It does. Yeah, I can see that. I think that's potentially just the colour scheme of like the eyes makes it look similar.
He's quite weirdly posed as well when you look at the 360 view of him. He's sort of, he's obviously... Well, he's very tall, but he's also sort of leaning forwards, isn't he? He's very much leaning into the... leaning towards. And then obviously he's got his little walking stick, and maybe it's just how the pitch is done, but it's actually not sort of on the floor either. He's clearly kind of coming to the end of a stride or something.
That is actually really bizarre that it's not. Or maybe they've just clipped off too much of the start. That is odd. But there's some nice little details. Like if you look at him in the side profile, like you can see him just clutching his cape, which isn't something you normally see happening. It's just like a really nice touch.
They've been doing that a lot recently with character models. Like a lot of the Custodes models are holding their cape for some reason.
It's true. It's the same as Trajan Valores is definitely a cape grasper, a cape clutcher. There you go.
And the 4-year-old one's clutching his cape as well.
What you mean? The bold one?
Not Ixion Hale, but the generic shield captain, which
no one will ever buy because it's a terrible model, unless you have bought it, in which case, fair enough, you are allowed to like it. I just don't think it's very good.
For now, for today,
I forgive.
I can imagine that they do hands clutching the cape because then it adds extra ripples onto the cape, so it's much nicer, like when you're looking at the model from the back, just because. The more ripply it is, the better it will look. More fun it will be to paint.
I do like it though. I think it's a nice blend of the design, but also the history behind that model. As Joe said, they are well known for being quite fragile and quite tall kind of things. Yeah, I really really like it. I think it's a really gorgeous sculpt. Definitely amongst the better sculpts of the range for sure.
It's really good. I think overall all the models are, not necessarily all of them, but like 95% of the Blackstone Fortress models are pretty fantastic.
Well, maybe rather than doing the whole we run down the list of the stuff we like and then follow up with the stuff we don't like, maybe that's a perfect segue for you to tell us the model you don't like or like the least, I suppose. What would you reckon, Joe? Does that sound reasonable?
Yeah, I think we should do a like and a dislike.
Boosh.
Start soft and then go for the kidneys.
So which model don't you like the look of, Phil?
Well, that is and forgive me if I pronounce them wrong, the Urgles, which are the Dark Elder.
Are you saying the Urgles are ugly?
Oh, brilliant. They are. They're just like, they're just really like monopose in a really odd pose. But then if you look at the Finecast models, you just go, they look better than the...
They're almost cartoonish in comparison.
I don't know, because quite often, like, if I see a model that I don't like, it's often just the way it's been photographed. And then if we end up at Warhammer World or we see it in a store, you actually go, oh, wow, that actually does it.
I've actually seen these in a store, and they're terrible. In fact, I actually think, like, given how they've been photographed and they've clearly been painted by a good painter, the pictures are probably the best you're ever going to see of them.
Yeah, they've just got this weird, like, some of them, the majority of them have their palms of their hands facing backwards, as if they've just shoved past someone, and they're like, I'm here. But it's just like a really odd pose. Like, they don't look like they're clawing at you. They're not running. They're really static. They're just, like, stood there as if, like, come at me or look at me. But it's not particularly
It's
interesting.
kind of like they're all doing the Thriller dance.
Well, I was going to say they kind of look like they're doing. You ever see that dance where people kind of wobble their arms around as if they're disjointed from their upper arms, so like they're kind of like frantically flipping them about like a madman.
You mean flossing?
Is that what it is?
I
Well,
believe
no,
that's what the kids call it today.
I don't think that's the
Oh my
one
God.
because the flossing is the one where the arm goes back and forwards in a
Oh
circulation.
yes. Oh, so that's not the one you're thinking.
No, I'm thinking of more just sort of maybe like I can't think. I'll have to look up the dance maneuver, but he's definitely got that thing. Also, as well, weirdly, am I the only one getting a? Who amongst us remembers Last of the Summer Wine here?
Oh, I do. Yeah.
Do you know the old guy who used to wear the hat, the really ragged one that used to wear the hat? Kind of reminds me of him. I imagine it's like a demonized, naked version of him who wore the hat in Last of the Summer Wine. I can
Was he
imagine
really
him.
like lechy, going around
really
staring at all the old ladies' bums?
That's it. I can imagine him rolling down a hill in a bathtub. That's what I think when I see this model.
For anyone that's not watched it, just go on YouTube and there must be clips of it.
Absolutely. It's a British institution. If you were born somewhere in the 80s, you will have spent a good amount of your Sunday evening watching Last of the Summer Wine because there was only 4 channels back in the 80s. And as a child, as a child, it was moderately amusing to watch old men fall down a hill in a bathtub. But you realise over the course of time, it's not quite what it was. But it was a sort of an institution back in the day, much like Antique Roadshow, another Sunday evening or late afternoon light entertainment. What a time to be alive it was!
Isn't Antiques Roadshow still going?
Oh yeah. I even think Last of the Summer Wine's still going. You know.
Oh, I
Are
don't
they
know
all
about
dead
that.
now?
No, I think they've got.
you want
I think they've got Burt Kwok on it now, haven't they?
Who the hell's he?
You know, Burt Kwok, the guy who was on the Harry Hill show, who did the "Hey Little Hen" song.
Oh, I.
Yeah. I can do the song for you. Hang on, I'll do it right now. Hey, little hen, when will you lay me an egg for my tea? Hey, little hen, when will you try to supply one to me? That was what he did every week on the Harry Hill show.
This is now obviously part of the musical part of the podcast that we're bringing in.
Exactly, it's a new segment.
Every week there's a classic TV section followed by a musical interlude.
Absolutely.
I think we should bring that in.
Absolutely.
Next week is keeping up appearances.
Well, there you go. I was hopeful that if I started off the song, you'd remember it and you would have kind of completed it with me. I thought it could have been a beautiful, duet or a trio. But there you go. Wasn't to be. I'm going to keep that in though for prosperity. That's that needs to remain for all to hear. I think I didn't do a terrible job. It depends what. Maybe
to save you babbling.
Yes, thank you. Please dig me out of this hole.
What are your favourite models?
Thank God, Joe. See, you're getting good at this, man. Good work.
Yeah.
So my favourite model, if I was to choose but one, which I am, is the Kroot new character guy. I believe his name is Dayak, something along those lines. He is a fantastic looking miniature, and I know I mentioned this in the last episode, but one that gives me a lot of hope that eventually soon we will see a new range of Kroot plastic models and potentially even a Kroot Codex, because I think the Kroot are an incredibly iconic unit within the Tau army list. They've been there since the beginning of the Tau. There was a Kroot Codex that came out ages ago. I think they did it in like 4th edition.
It was back when Forge World released the Narlock and stuff like that, wasn't it?
Yeah, that's the one. But I mean, this is the thing. I really love the Kroot. I think when I played Tau in the initial instance, when they came out in 3rd edition, maybe even 4th edition, I really loved the Kroot. And I also loved the Kroot even more when there was that iconic piece of photography where there's the guy rummaging through a rule book as the guy's up by the table with his thumbs up with a line of Kroot across the back wall edge. I think ever since then they have cemented their place in 40k. But the versatility of this model as well, the fact that you could very comfortably put it into a Tau army, not just as the rules that they supply you for it as it is, but also just to use it as like a shaper for your unit of Kroot. Kroot have not had a good shaper model. I mean, they did have back in the day, and still possibly today. I don't know if they've removed it from the range.
If you like eBay, you can probably pick up the very old school yet very nice Games Day shaper they did.
Oh, did they do a Games Day one as well? Because I remember there was one that always sort of had the rifle over his head. He was like holding it up and sort of like cheering.
There's one who was kind of like held his Kroot rifle across his chest and then had like a cloak draped over one shoulder and like half his body. It was very. I think I've actually got one knocking about somewhere.
There you go. Very reminiscent of, well, I suppose very similar to this model then in some respects. So he's definitely got that same vibe. But no, I really like this model. I think it's really, really beautiful. It's just great to see a new plastic sculpt for Kroot. So I'm well in favour of this guy. He's a 2 thumbs up for me. Phil, any thoughts on Kroot, man?
I really like him. He's got loads of detail to him. He's pretty cool looking. Got that kind of tribal aesthetic. I think it would be really good to get the Kroot expanded out into their own sort of sub-faction, get their own codex. And judging on how Games Workshop seem to be expanding the lore by taking something that already exists and then giving them their own sub-faction, such as like Gene Stealer Cults did have a faction back in the day and hadn't really had anything for a while, and they've now got their faction. And then, things like Knights had a model originally, and then they've got a much more rounded codex now. I think we'll see. I think there'll be good bets on a Kroot one coming at some point.
What Kroot models? But there's the Kroot, the Krootox, the Kroot Hounds, and the Shaper, wasn't there?
Yeah, and obviously the actual. You did mention the Kroot infantry as well, obviously.
Yeah. And there was like the Narloks, which were the big ones, but weren't there like smaller cavalry versions?
Oh God, now you're asking. No, I don't know. Now I think you might be right. Actually, I think that was a forge.
I thought there was, yeah.
Yeah, there could very well have been a cavalry variant of the Kroot as well, but I can't remember.
They're kind of like the 40k Gungans.
Very, very much so, I think.
Yeah.
I think they deserve better than to be called Gungans, though. I mean, come on now.
Yeah, there was Krootox Rider, which was like a big gun on the back of the model.
Oh, that was a horrible model as well. It was like a real ugly, bullish-looking thing. Yeah. Wasn't super keen on that one. But this Kroot model, it's well nice. It's well nice.
And what model don't you like?
Well, quite controversially, for a man who really, really likes the Eldari/Elder range, my least favourite model in this is the Eldari or Elder Ranger. The Baltan Elder Ranger, I just think, is an atrocious mess of a miniature, and quite concerning for what potentially could become of future updates for my beloved Eldari faction, because this, to me, I mean, for one, obviously the size and stature of the model makes it really difficult to even integrate into the existing range of Rangers. So if I was to take this model and slap it in a Ranger unit, I think it would look absolutely out of place amongst it. That being said, there is obviously something to be said that you could say that this model could perfectly represent Illic, which obviously would mean not painting it in the Baltan colour scheme. You'd have to use the LL-TOC colour scheme. But nonetheless, it does have the same loadout, albeit this is obviously a woman and Illic is not. But yeah, no, everything about this model just sort of upsets me in the way that it's posed, the size of the weaponry, the relatively bulky size of it. Even the fact that if you look at the beautifully painted, and I will admit it's beautifully painted version of it on the Games Workshop website, they've given her these hideous, massive grey eyebrows, which absolutely, baffle me. I mean, don't get me wrong, I'm not going to start getting into a rant about, how they've represented the overall kind of feminine form of the character. It's just more about just the bulky sort of stature, the absurdly large weaponry that they're carrying, which is seemingly out of kilter with everything. I genuinely think, had they reposed this miniature to have the long rifle positioned kind of, starting kind of at the sort of top kind of section of the chest and moving down across the torso, I think actually that probably would have been a much more sleek and elegant, interesting pose. I also
even in like a,
sorry,
even like in a firing position would have looked way
Yeah,
better.
I think like a knee up on a rock or something with in a firing position would have looked a bit more, would have been better, even if the barrel's then poking at other models on the other hexes as you're playing. Yeah, I've got to agree with you. I'm not a fan of the model at all. It's definitely the weakest of the hero models.
If I was to try and pick things that I liked about the model, I like the kind of really long hood design they've done. So the hood kind of goes over the head, but then also has this long kind of like tail to it, kind of like Green Goblin from Spider-Man. And also as well, I like the detailing of these leggings that they've gone for, with the way that the armor kind of comes through the bottom of the leggings there. So like, the way that the sort of armor detailings are actually displayed there is quite nice. I think the decoration and of the long rifle is really cool. But again, the stuff I'm not super keen on is they've added in these like scope type kind of backpack editions, which are similar to the ones that you see on Dire Avengers, but they've added this to her, which I assume has rule benefits within the game, but it just sort of again adds a bit of weird bulk to it. I'm not a fan of the jewel that they've decided to have kind of dangle between her legs. It just looks horrible. And I just don't know what they were going for with that. I can only ever see that sword or dagger or whatever it is causing you issues. It looks really fragile and looks like something you'll probably snap off pretty quickly. And the end of that long rifle is going to be an absolute pain as well. So in practical terms, I think it's going to be a pain to carry around. There's so much that I don't like about this model, which again is a real shame, because I would have loved a really beautiful new kind of plastic ranger to add into my own units of rangers that I have for my Eldari army. I mean, everything that is wrong with this model is perfectly juxtapositioned with everything that's right about the Kroot model. The Kroot model is subtle, it's true to its kind of heritage. It looks like a Kroot and would fit in with a Kroot unit.
I suppose like they didn't want to make the two models look similar, because they both fulfill a very similar role within the team. And I guess for a designer's position or a sculptor's position, they're like, how can we distinguish these two at a distance? I think they kind of just missed out a little bit.
I think as well, it might have been a good idea for him not to have put that that kind of grill, that face mask over the mouth. I think if it actually had kind of a full sort of fully facial features and stuff and was showing some emotion, you probably actually would have a bit more of a connection to it, or might pull the whole thing together. I think it is that lack of like expression on the model as well, which takes a lot away from it.
She's a very flat, like a very flat miniature, and very reminiscent of old like sort of lead minis where they're all single cast. Like her arms and everything, and her legs all posed on the same plane. with the exception of the backpack, which is like added on, there's no real depth to the model.
It's very classic hero pose, isn't it?
Yeah, and even the Kroot model has that same issue. Like if you look at a Kroot model side on, it looks a bit odd because it does look super thin. But when you look at it from side on, it looks like it's much more natural pose, and there is depth sort of with him holding the gun. Although it's obviously sort of all one big sculpt, whereas she's sort of like spread out, almost like doing jumping jacks. But there's nothing like if the dagger was posed sort of slightly forwards, or the gun was down on the ground, and there was more of the Z axis, so to speak, in terms of the depth of the model, then that would probably help it look a little bit better. And I think sometimes they do that deliberately to hark back to those old kind of poses that did look a bit odd, a bit silly. But I think that's why they do it sometimes, even now.
I think there is real potential for this model if you're a good converter, to potentially take this model and actually turn it into something quite interesting. But I mean, yeah, there's some good elements, but overall, I think it just sort of doesn't quite hit the mark. So there you go. Not a fan of that one. Should I ask you, Joe, what your favourite model is, in the spirit of asking you that question?
Yeah. I like the Pile Spawn Flamer Lady. She's probably my favourite sculpt from the box. It's because she's different, and it kind of gives us a bit of an indication to what the Sisters line is going to potentially look like as well. Because unlike the Eldar model, which is clearly a woman, they've made this one more generic looking. Like, it's still, by looking at it, you can tell that it's a woman, but there's no obvious boob armor. It's just a slender body, but obviously covered up with all the armor and all the tattered robes.
I think that's the thing with this model. I think, you know, what this model is doing really well is it's got that kind of subtle but functional armor that's obviously very very much in line with probably the direction they're going to be taking the Adeptus Sororitas when it comes out, because I think you definitely get that very sort of functional armor vibe off of it. They're not doing this for any form of for any kind of a sex appeal. It's very much a case of I'm going out to smash up some heretics, and I've brought my flamethrower along for good measure.
I like the paint job on it, and it's got a very kind of like almost medieval armor, and the little embossed Aquila on the shoulder pads is like a really nice detail.
What do you reckon the bone is on the flamer? Where did that come from?
Well, that's probably like a little reliquary. Like it's probably gives it luck, makes it work.
It was from her favourite dog, or that's what drove her to it.
And the pose-wise, in comparison to the Eldar model, there's a lot of motion in this. It's a very aggressive stance that they've taken.
But it's such a natural pose. It's like it's motion. You've got she's leaning forwards, like stepping forwards, but then you've got the flames from the gun into a little torch thing on her backpack going backwards, which gives it a nice amount of motion. It's just such a better model.
It's got a lot of weight in that motion as well. I think it feels, it looks substantial in that sense. And the only criticism I could give this model legitimately is the paint job that they've done on the Games Workshop website. They've given her these really mad kind of black outlines to her eyes, which is
mascara, isn't it?
Well, yeah, but I just think it really frames the face in a really weird way. But again, in an interesting kind of twist versus what I was saying about the Elder Ranger, the fact that you've removed some of the face with this character by putting that mask over the mouth and nose actually kind of adds to that kind of zealoty kind of look and feel of it. Gives it more of a kind of menacing tone, which is, I think, quite useful in this instance.
I think the way they've highlighted the eyes, though, gives a very sinister eye look. Like there's almost an aggressive appeal to the model. in the face.
I think when you're painting it for yourself, though, I think you could probably tone that down quite a bit. I imagine they've done that specifically to distinguish where the eyes for the purposes of photography. But I feel like with your own models, you can probably achieve a better outcome for that. Plus, also, I imagine that's probably not such an issue when you're seeing it on the tabletop. But that literally would be the only thing I would critique about it, is the way they've painted the eyes. Yeah.
What I really like about the paint job is, so you've got the flamer chainsaw combo, and they've put Vindicator, like they've obviously free-handed that. And then if you like on the 360 one, go to the back, there's a pipe running along the chainsaw, which they've done in like the classic Hazard stripe colour scheme of yellow and black. And it's like the painter's gone to the detail to do Hazard stripes, which are quite time-consuming, to the back part of the model that you won't normally see in the majority of the photos of it. It's like, I like that little touch that they've gone to that much effort with this model to paint it in.
It is nice. So, Joe, we've established that you like that model a lot. What model are you not so keen on in the range?
I am not massively keen on the wibbly tentacle electro people, whose names have completely escaped me. What are they called? The Negavolt cultists.
Bit of a mouthful.
Yeah, they're just so like all four models look exactly the same. There's no variation in pose.
Well, no. They've got two of them have got sticks going slightly forwards, and two of them have got one stick forwards, one stick back.
Great. Some of them are stepping forward on their left leg, and some of them are stepping forward on their right leg.
It's definitely two sculpts with different. So the bodies, there's only two variations, and then I think the arms. Actually, no, they're literally just two sculpts.
Yeah, two sculpts.
There's no variation in it unless you convert them.
But they're not threatening. They're not scary things. Like the traitor guardsmen in the box set, they're all dynamic running combat poses, where these guys are just kind of stomping forwards.
I think that's what I do. They're like stalking the corridors.
Yeah, but they're not like walking forward with purpose, like you see on like the front covers of computer games. Like there's no they're just kind of just there. Like the models don't evoke anything.
See, I've obviously keeping up with the spirit of coming up with bizarre comparisons or analogies for these things. I recently went to Alton Towers with my family, and we went in these various horror mazes that they do in Alton Towers. And one of the horror mazes was themed around the Nemesis roller coaster. And what they've been doing there is they've had this Nemesis kind of theme around the idea that it's this monstrous creature, and the idea of this one was that they've basically put you inside the Nemesis monster that's going to digest you, and they came up with all these, like, basically it was just a blacked out room full of actors all dressed up as monstrous terrifying beasts, and it was all the usual kind of mad mix of mashed up stuff that you would sort of associate with if you gave very little effort to coming up with some sort of scary combination of clothes and things like that. It was just a mishmash of stuff. All the people in that experience looked like this. They looked like they just had some sort of body armor on that they just sort of made because they're like, whatever, it sort of looks like body armor. And then they went, I've got to get some sort of bondage mask on my face, because what's more terrifying than a man in a bondage mask? And I can't just have bare arms. I better just wrap some tape around me, and I don't know, I'll stick a thing on my shoulder just to look like, I've got something coming out of me, and then I'll put some things over me legs, and I don't know, I'll just, whack a backpack on with some lights or something, and I'm a monster. I kind of feel like it's like the equivalent of that. Like, it doesn't look, nothing about this is iconic, nothing about this is interesting. They've got a horribly ugly silhouette. I think, honestly, it's one of the worst models Games Workshop has produced in
I wouldn't
years.
go that far.
Really? What's worse than this?
The Torox.
No, the Torox.
No, the Torox is great.
It's awful. No, it's awful. Anyway, what I was going to say, what I sort of like about these is the like Medusa style hair, even though I think it makes the model messy. But what I really like about it is it's clearly a nod to like the Electro Priests, and this is like Dark Mechanicum, like the power packs on the back are very reminiscent of those Electro Priest models, and that this hints at an entire new faction of Dark Mechanicum, although they've called them what is it? It's like they haven't called them Dark Mechanicum.
Negavolt cultists.
Yeah, Negavolt cultists, which reminded me a lot of the I'm trying to think what they're called now, but the Rogue Trader sort of demonic electro monsters from the Rogue Trader box, where it's all to do with the warp and like demons that are tied with electronics. So it's interesting that they've carried on that theme of chaotic electronical devices and things over to this, but doing it in a completely separate way.
But the
Also,
thing is,
isn't like
sorry, Joe.
that's good. Isn't like the word like use the word nega? Isn't that like in the old fight 'em up kind of computer games where like the final boss is just the main character just in negative.
Yeah, because it just means yeah, that's exactly what it means.
Yeah, it makes me think of Scott Pilgrim at the end.
Yeah,
He has to fight Nega Scott.
exactly.
I think if you were to compare it to the sculpts that they did for Rogue Trader, which were those kind of Nurgle-based, kind of clearly mechanical elements, because they got those like robotic heads and whatever else they had going on with those sort of creatures. I think that they just, again, they had some sort of charisma and quite a bit of like, and again, I think obviously having all the putridy qualities of Nurgle kind of, helped out a big way. These models, I mean, again, I know it's a bit of a harsh statement, and the Taurox, if you put wheels on it, Taurox is a nice model, but with the tracks, I agree, it's not great, but it's got potential. But these things, I'm just, when I saw it, I genuinely was, it kind of killed some of the enthusiasm I had for Blackstone Fortress when I saw it, but that, but it's since recovered.
Well, what's interesting when you mentioned about the masks is actually I think there's a bit of a trend to cover faces in 40k and fantasy, because I think people really struggle to paint them, so like paint the eyes and things like that. So I think there's a bit of a trend to avoid that issue by just making the masks or gas masks or whatever. You even got like a whole race like Caradron Overlords. Just none of them have faces. It's just all given masks.
Yeah.
Stormcast Eternals, that's all given masks. But then they go, oh, but now we actually can't see any of the characters. So now we need to start taking the masks off. So I actually do have to end up painting some of them. So I think there's a bit of a trend in that, because actually it's quite hard to paint faces well. So maybe that is why things like these Negavolt cultists have masks on.
Yeah, agreed. And before we move on to the next segment, one thing I will say, if I can... Joe, did you have any more to add to your things you disliked about the weird dreadlocky guys?
The dreadlocky hair, I can't stand it with the weird... Like it's like they're gonna go forward and suck someone's face. They cut it. I'm happy for them to have like weird tentacle cable hair, but have it like dreadlocks kind of thing, like
or just hanging down.
Yeah, like on like Striking Scorpions kind of thing, or have them kind of like just hanging slackly around their face. Not like flailing around all over them. If you got rid of those parts of the models and just gave a bit more character around the body section with these cables hanging around them, I think it'd look way better. What I could do is use like guitar wire, just cut all those off and then just like bend some guitar wire around them would probably help.
I would call that a wasted effort, mate. I just think I don't know what you could do to make these things better. They're just nothing. They're just so fundamentally bad that I don't think anything about them is worth salvaging. I think the fact that they've got these baton, weapon variants as well, it just sort of nothing about it's working for me. I'm not crazy keen on it either. But yeah, one thing I was going to say, in addition to the stuff there, shout-outs to the Renegade Guardsman Sergeant with the chainsword and las pistol. That is also gorgeous.
I've got some fun facts about the Renegade Guardsman, and it is that they're using Lucius pattern las guns and flamers, which have only been modelled on the Krieg Guardsman before, up until now. So it's interesting that they're using the same weapons.
Oh, really? Are you saying these are traitor Krieg?
Well, no, because obviously it's weird. The helmets and the shoulder pads are very much Cadians. So if anything, they're traitor Cadians, I would say. But the pattern of the gun and the flamer are very similar.
Is that because they're more mass-produced and easier to get hold of?
I don't know. It's just a different Forge world, isn't it? So depending on where you are in the world is where you're going to get it from. And I mean, they're not 100% identical. The Flamer's slightly different, but I think that's partly in terms of extrapolating something such as the sort of fine detail on the resin kits that Forge world produced to something a bit more mass-marketed. Because one of the things I've always said about Krieg is that they're highly detailed and things like the las guns are a bit too thin to like easily pull off in plastic, but obviously they've done it here. And yeah, those models are absolutely stunning. The Rogue Psychers are amazing. They're probably one of my favourites out of the kind of the bad guys range.
Yeah,
this could potentially.
Oh, sorry, Joe.
This could potentially herald a whole new line of plastic guardsmen.
Well,
but also true scale. Or to scale.
It would be interesting to have these next to Cadians to see how they compare to the current plastics, and also next to the Kriegsmen to see how they compare to the old Forge World stuff. And what's interesting, and I've said this before, is they discontinued the Renegade Militia line of Forge World because they apparently didn't sell very well. But then they decided that they will produce them in plastic because they're called traitor guardsmen, but that's effectively the same as renegade militia. So because Forge World do sometimes create something and then Games Workshop will just take it. So you've seen it here with even the Lucius pattern guns. Like that was a concept, I believe, just done by Forge World, and then Games Workshop used it. And then the whole concept of the traitor guardsman is really the Forge World line that they've now moved over to plastic. So it'd be interesting to see if this becomes like its own codex next year.
Were the Lucius pattern las guns also used by the Escher gang as well?
Might be, actually. They use something very similar. I don't think they tend to be the exact same ones.
Fair enough.
I'd have to have a look it up.
Well, there you go. Would you say we're done with this segment, Jojo?
I'd go so far as to say that.
Wonderful.
Yeah.
Shall we transition on to the next bit?
Let us fly there.
Through the crow's eye.
Yeah. I don't mind doing it.
Yeah, go on, you carry on, Joe.
Come on, Joe. Let's do it again.
All right, then.
Ready when you are, Joe.
I was born ready. I wasn't, but I'm going to say that I am. Right, so now that lot's done with, we can move on to talking about the game itself. So...
What game though, Joe? What if someone skips to this section and they don't know what we're talking about?
Well, they would be mad, I say, because why would you give up on such incredible content, such as a 40-minute rant on terrible Eldar sculpts?
Well, I don't think it was a 40-minute rant on terrible Eldar sculpts. I thought it was, maybe 10.
It was considerable.
Well, I'll find out later when I edit this all together. Maybe I'll scale it down.
We'll warn them on the intro and in the writing. Prepare for another rant.
And also contains singing.
It does also contain singing.
Can we put in some kind of SpongeBob SquarePants-esque 4 hours later in between one of your rants, and then you just continue in kind of thing?
I didn't think it was that ranty. Was it really that bad?
It was right. I don't know. I phased out for a bit.
Well, that's true. That's true. I mean, that's probably what it was. There was the whole time we were waiting for you to get involved and move us along.
Yeah. Anyway, so we're now going to talk about the game. And when I say we, I mean Dan. Because he has watched the videos and done all the intense reading.
Have you not watched the videos, Joe?
Oh, I'm too busy for that.
I love this. I love this. This is, I mean, without giving too much away, Joe's the only person who legitimately should be involved in these kind of like learning these things. He's the only one with a job in the tabletop wargaming world.
You two don't have jobs.
No, I do have a job, but my job is, my job isn't anything to do with tabletop wargaming. It's like, you should know these things, Joe, for the business.
I do know these things.
Anyway.
So what I know is that there are some dice that are funky shapes, and they've got triangles on them. There's a D20 in the box. Pretty sure about that.
Yep, the Blackstone dice, I believe they call it.
It's now played on hexagonal tiles as well, which I think is very cool and crazy.
It's like the upgrade.
Shakespeare-esque.
Yeah.
It's like when Civilization 5 came out after Civilization 4. They've moved to hexagons. It's crazy times.
It's stolen a lot of things from Shadespire, haven't they? Because you've got the hexagonal things, which is quite cool because it means that your corridors go all funky and going off in random directions. But they've also had, like, your characters become inspired whilst you're playing as well.
Yeah, I thought that too. But then, didn't they have a similar mechanic in Silver Tower, or was it just called something different?
No, they did. They had I can't remember exactly what the mechanic was titled, but they did have a leveling system. So every time you either killed a model or you accomplished something that was on your character sheet that gave you more,
you gained experience. Whereas this one
up in level.
Yes.
Yeah, but in this, your characters get better. They become inspired, like in Silver Tower. Not in Silver Tower. In Shadespire.
Yeah, because this time you flip it over and you've got different stats and abilities, which is exactly like Shadespire. So they've obviously taken that kind of concept.
The weird thing is they have to achieve certain things. So, for instance, like some characters they'll inspire whilst you're playing, because they have to like kill X amount of enemies or activate door or heals or something like that. Whereas there's other characters that begin the game inspired if they have like a specific piece of war gear. But if you don't have that war gear, you're kind of stuck in your normal state.
Well, is the idea that you might pick that up on a map?
I would assume so.
Or on an encounter. It's interesting because it is very similar to Shadespire, where every single faction has a different way of becoming inspired, and they've just rolled that out to. It reminds me a lot of Warhammer Quest, the OG game. The majority of my experience of Warhammer Quest is the original game, Warhammer Quest and Hero Quest. And in Warhammer Quest, there was a brilliant secret. I want to say it was a secret objective, but it was secret something or other, and it was an expansion that came in White Dwarf, and you could print them out and cut them out, which is what I used to do. And you would shuffle the deck and give each character this secret objective that they had to fulfill. And it was basically, you had the main objective, kill a dragon, or whatever it might be. But then each character had their own unique objective to fulfill, which would then give them a specific amount of treasure or gold if they completed it by the end. And the whole idea is you never shared it with any of the other people. And it feels like that's almost taken exactly like lifted from that old game, and they've sort of added it in here with the sort of Shadespire-esque take on it for inspiring. Although I think it's weird that if I'm right in thinking that it's not actually secret. They call it secret, but all your other players know how you inspire, so it's not really secret.
Well, I suppose the thing is with the inspiration mechanic, though, is that it's only in the other player's benefit. I mean, the only time where that probably actually needs to be considered as a secretive mechanic or even utilized as one is when you're playing in a 5-player format, or someone is taking on the role of the dungeon master, as it were, or the whatever they're going to call that. But yeah, I think if you're playing against a person who represents the enemies, then maybe keeping that criteria secret is handy for tactical purposes.
Well, I think the enemies run on their own like inbuilt AI, or game, whatever the board game version of AI is.
Yes, they do, but there is also an option for someone to control them.
Yeah, because the game says 1 to 5 players.
Correct. Yeah.
So I imagine it would have to, otherwise this is one guy playing against himself.
Yeah, so you can play it solo play, so you can just play it on your own, because there's like an AI mechanic for deciding how they move. So if you do 1 to 4 players, you can do it all as cooperative versus the deck of cards and versus the AI, so to speak. And then 5 player is meant to be where you have one person play the GM, and then everyone else plays as the heroes. Now, in theory, if you have 3 players, you could have 2 people and then 1 player taking on the GM role if you really wanted to. I'm sure that's possible.
I mean, I would be hugely in favour of playing the GM role on a regular basis. I love all that nonsense. I love being the big idiot trying to screw over the other players. It's super fun.
Yeah, same here. Because I obviously owned the original Warhammer Quest, whenever I played that with people, I'd always end up being the GM.
The guy would be Spartacus all over again.
Oh, what, the game Spartacus?
Yeah.
Well, I mean, different, but yeah, similar in very, very similar ways. But I think if we can probably chat quickly about kind of core mechanics that are within the game. So obviously, as Joe kind of touched upon at the start, there are several different types of dice that you use. So the way that they've kind of indicated someone's improved ability is by utilizing a D6 dice versus a D8 versus a D12. Yeah, D12. So effectively, if your D6 roll, you're deemed to be better odds of achieving the desired outcome. So if what you're using as a D6 roll, you're better than if you're rolling a D12, which obviously has a decreased chance of achieving.
I thought it was the other way around, but I could be wrong.
No, so the middle one is the actually, is it a D? I'm just trying to pull up the images now of exactly what the different dice types are.
It's D6, D8, and D12 by the looks of it.
Yeah, that is correct. Yeah, so so I actually think I got that the wrong way around in the description. So yes, potentially it's the D6 is the worst one, and then the more sided dice is better. Either way, it has different odds and different outcomes based on your character's abilities, which is an interesting take on things. What's really interesting about this game as well is that they've imported a lot of the established Warhammer Quest Silver Tower mechanics. So this has the fate dice. So if you don't have a controlling player for the enemies, you pass around this token which determines you as the fated player, or the guy or girl who has to roll for what the enemy AI does. And in doing so, you roll the fate dice. So you roll, I believe, 5 dice. I'm going to say potentially 6, but I think it's 5. You roll your 5 dice, and if you roll any doubles, so if you were to roll, I don't know, on 5 dice, if you rolled 3 6s, a 1 and a 2, all 3 of those 6s would be discarded, and the 1 and 2 would become part of your central dice pool. And every player can kind of pick from that dice pool to enable them to, perform additional actions, which is straight out of Silver Tower. Made a lot of sense within the realm of Silver Tower, and I guess does still here. How did you guys sort of feel like that mechanic worked when we played Silver Tower in the past? I always thought it was quite interesting.
I enjoyed it. I thought it was quite cool. But then, like I always found that like some of the activation dice, like what you had to roll was often quite low for like some abilities. So like the priest guy, like his lightning activation was something like a 3 or something like that. So you roll
if
your
you're
4
talking,
dice.
if you're talking Silver Tower, actually that was 6s. So you had to have 6s to perform that AOE thing.
Yeah.
But on that topic, I mean, so the way that mechanic works, if it wasn't kind of clear from what I was describing before, you roll every single player at the start of the round rolls up to 4d6. Now, depending on how much damage your character has taken, you may have that number reduced. But in most instances, at the start of the game, you'll roll 4d6, and you roll those 4d6, and those become your kind of pool of dice that you use to activate your characters in different ways. So if you've rolled a 1, there are a number of actions that only need a 1+ to activate, such as movement, or potentially some variants of combat only requires a 1+ to activate. But then the better skills, the more powerful skills, require a dice with a higher value, the best of which probably being attributed to a 6+ result. So that's where the kind of relationship between the destiny dice or the fate dice or whatever you want to call them that you rolled at the start comes into play with what you've rolled individually. Because if you've had a bad roll, but there's a 6 and a 5 in the middle that you can kind of get and utilize, it can amplify what you're doing. What's also really interesting in this game versus Silver Tower effectively operated on the idea that I'm the number 1 player in this instance example, Phil's next, then it's Joe, then it's Tim for the sake of example, and then the AI enemies activate. So the sequence always was, it starts with the guy who's got the token, who is player 1, and then it would either go clockwise or anti-clockwise depending on how you've done it up to that point. But the point of that is every one of the controlling players could do something, and then the enemy would respond. In Blackstone Fortress, you actually have a system where you kind of roll for your priorities, and then you essentially map out a sequence of events. So if you think of kind of turn-based strategy games like an XCOM, or even think about things like, say, like Final Fantasy X, for example, where the mechanics were that you would know when your character is activating, but then you would know because you would see it on the screen when the enemy is activating. So you now have a whole heap of new mechanics around the order of activation that happens, because I can't, if I was in this instance supposed to be going first, I have to go first, unless of course I have an ability or a skill or something in play that allows me to disrupt that sequence of events. So what's really interesting about that is that unlike in Silver Tower, where you can kind of go, well, I'll just move out of the way here, and then you can do this, and that'll be fine. In this, it's like, well, actually, we might be in a situation where the enemy activates 2 times before the rest of my team activates, and that creates a whole new world of nuanced mechanics and situations. So that's really interesting, if not a little bit, additionally complicated, but it does add some tactical depth.
It does look nice. Like, so basically, it's a little deck of cards that you shuffle, and
That's it. Yeah.
Each card has a player on it, or it says like group 1 and 2, because when you do a combat, you tend to have two blocks of units, and they're labelled either 1 or 2. So you don't need cards that are specific to the enemy you're fighting. It's just numbered in a sort of generic way. Now, that takes up quite a bit of space on the table because it's like a little timeline. So I think you just shuffle them and then you flip them over in sequence to find out where your characters lie in amongst all the enemies. So it takes up a bit of table space, but I like the sort of level of detail that gives you when you're playing the game.
I think it works better as well in the sense that in this game, it's all about these independent encounters. So unlike, say, in Silver Tower, where you're, going through a sequence of rooms, and again, I might be wrong in this assertion, but it looks like each kind of one of these games are broken up into sort of instances. So the idea is that there's lots of different potential outcomes and lots of different types of builds, but you're only really ever concentrating on one kind of instance, and then in completion of that room, you then go on and effectively respawn in a new location that you then draw after having gone back to your ships or done some trading or done whatever it is that you needed to do. So that's really interesting, because what it does do is it removes some of the complexities that, to be honest with you, Silver Tower I felt like had a good workaround. But if you remember the old Warhammer Quest mechanics, you used to end up with these ridiculous boards of tiles going on for miles that no ordinary table could facilitate.
And you invariably had to like slide it along quite carefully to try and make some room because you decided to explore in a certain direction. It's interesting because with that one I liked the fact that you built the dungeon as you go. You get to the end of a room and then you'd be like, I'm exploring the next room, you add the tile down, it kind of grows organically. In Silver Tower they sort of deliberately capped that by saying you can only ever see the room that's in front of you and the room that's behind you and the room that you're in. And that way it kind of made the table a bit cleaner, and they gave it the sort of the story that, you know, the Silver Tower is forever changing. So even if you were to go back on yourself, you would discover a new room because it's just constantly changing. And then this one, I think partly because the mechanics are more shooting focused, they need more. You can't just explore one room at a time, because that only really works if you like quite close combat focused. So instead of one room at a time, it's almost like one mini dungeon at a time. And you have a deck of cards, and it's either like an encounter, which is where you basically build a map of multiple rooms all together, which is your one dungeon, or it's like an event which you just sort of you don't need a map to solve. You just kind of go and read the card and do the instructions. But with that, it doesn't feel like you're building a dungeon. It just feels like you're doing lots of mini dungeons at once. So that's the thing that I'm a bit hesitant about with this mechanic. But it solves their problem again of how do you have a large dungeon without it deliberately taking up too much space on your table and going to be too big.
And I think as well, that creates one of the most kind of concerning aspects for me with this game, which is the relatively generic nature of all the tiles and the way that actually kind of diminishes some of the creativity of the game. Because one of the things I always liked about Warhammer Quest, even Silver Tower, which is by all accounts nowhere near as, you know, thematically interesting as some of the previous Warhammer Quests, or even Shadows over Hammerham, that place. You know, the thing I find with this is obviously what they've done is they've tried to create a generic enough set of tiles that you can use them in all sorts of different ways, which is cool because it means that you've created a lot of gameplay scenarios with not too much stuff. But even when you watch like the Let's Play video, the fact that you kind of draw out a card that says build this room, and you go, okay, cool, and you watch them and they speed it up, and yeah, it only took like 10 minutes or so for them to fish out all the tiles and put it all together. But inevitably with these kind of things, especially when you've got those little sort of single tile pieces or smaller pieces, you're going to, by the end of the game, once you started rolling dice, see this stuff start to fragment and start to kind of fall apart in front of your eyes as tiles start drifting apart and whatnot.
I mean, it's hard to tell because I've not seen one in person, but I think you're right. The tiles are the only things that concern me. Like, they just look a bit generic. I mean, it feels like I would much prefer more classic style, sort of almost like Space Hulk. You've got an engine room. You've got, you know, your captain's deck. You've got some, you know, much more grounded. And I think that was the thing that with Silver Tower that I didn't like, is the concept of the Silver Tower was so abstract. Because they wanted the idea of, the rooms are changing every time. So it didn't really matter what the rooms were because they could be anything. And it feels like they've almost taken that mechanic and they've just made this a bit too abstract because they've gone, it was weird, like with the story, they sort of retconned it from being like, it's now like the old one's ultimate weapon. And so they've made it stylistically completely different from, say, a Space Hulk, which is built by man. But I think it then makes it actually hard to relate to the board because it is so, like, it could just be anything. And then the other sort of thing that I'm a bit concerned about is the way, so you've got these big white lines which are denoting sort of like cover and that blocks line of sight.
Yeah.
Again, that's just it'd be interesting to see what the visual representation of that is on the board beyond. We've just drawn some lines on the hexes.
Yeah.
Because what was interesting with Shadespire is, so the very first version of Shadespire, they have like these blocked hexes, but they're like solid block hexes that you can't go into. And loads of people started creating their own, and there's like a few third-party people made the detail, but is a 3D representation, so you could place it on that tile to say this tile's blocked. And then when the new Shadespire came out, the Night Haunts, is they actually integrated that into the game as well. So they've created like little pieces and objective markers that you can place on to be these 3D representations of the things on the board. Like that was actually something really good that Hero Quest did. Like you got tables and chairs, and you got like the sarcophagus piece that you could place on, which brings that 2D thing to life. And it's like, this doesn't have any of that. It's just got some abstract lines drawn on the hexes to say this provides you cover. But otherwise, it just looks quite flat.
Yeah. What do you think of all that, Joe?
It's a weird one, isn't it? Because like, as primarily 40k players, we are used to having designated walls and line of sight blocking things. So it's like a weird part of our imagination that we have to add in that we're not entirely used to. But it shouldn't be too hard to use things like the Necromunda barricades that you can just blop in, and that should be all right. Or find a bunch of the hexagons that you know that you're probably never going to use, and then build bits on top of that, or cut out some plaster card in the same size and then put rubble on top.
I mean, it might be one of those things that once we actually play it, because obviously we're looking at these tiles from screenshots and from the Let's Play video, and it might actually be when you see it up close, it's not a problem, and that the multicoloured tiles do look great up close, and they sort of make more sense once you learn more about the lore and the story of Blackstone Fortress. And I think maybe because we're going in it quite cold, like it's quite easy to make that judgment of, it just looks like, you got a yellow room and a blue room and a green room, and then you just have a mix of those different rooms each time. Maybe it's not as bad as that.
I am slightly concerned that there are too many rules. So they've taken the rules from Silver Tower and then put more rules on top.
Well, yeah, so you've got, for example, you've got Precipice, and you have like which is like the space station you keep going back to, which is like the old town mechanic from Warhammer Quest. But you have that as a visual representation of like a card piece on the table, and you each have a type of ship and vessel, which gives you an ability, like a sort of normally once per game ability as you play through, and they're kind of cool. But again, that's like another thing that's sat on the table, taking up space.
Yeah, because and resources to collect, isn't it? So instead of leveling up, you collect resources to then spend at the shop. Is that right?
Yeah, I believe so. Again, it's not entirely, well, it wasn't entirely clear, or it hasn't been made entirely clear. But the broad consensus is there is a market trading style mechanic that allows you to kind of influence your character's progression.
Yeah, so I think from the Let's Play video, rather than say gain treasure and coin, you got Archaeotech, which is, the sort of science fiction name for strange alien technology. And it's like you collect that in various ways, and then when you complete your mission, you go back to Precipice, and then I think you trade that in for something, but they haven't really covered that. So
strange that they use that as a currency, having only just found the Blackstone Fortress.
Don't you come here with your plot holes.
They've adjusted their entire payment system to accommodate 7 explorers.
Well, I think it's only a currency in terms of you take these items, because it's basically a generic, like Archaeotech is a generic word for like treasure, like armor and stuff that you would normally sell for coin, and then you take that to Precipice and then you sell it for actual currency, But I think they might just skip out the conversion and they just say, is Archaeotech worth 2 or worth 4? I mean, I think
maybe what happened is that they went to the Blackstone Fortress, then they went back to Precipice, and then they turned up and say, "Hey, got this shiny thing," and they're what? That's worth one of those. All right, yeah.
3 whole beans.
I mean, in terms of plot holes, I would say the fact that an entire Imperial army hasn't descended upon the Blackstone Fortress to just take it over is probably a bigger plot hole than changing the currency. But I mean, it'd be interesting to read what the lore is about it.
Didn't in Battlefleet Gothic the Imperium and the Chaos have like these floating about as like battleships in Battlefleet Gothic? I swear they did.
Yeah. Well, I think I don't know if they both could, but Chaos definitely did. And this is what was weird because it feels like they've retconned it. So in Battlefleet Gothic, that if you look at them top down, they make the shape of the Chaos Star, which to me implied that they were just Chaos ships. And that's what I, as a kid, always thought they were. And then they've now changed it so they're the old ones who were the gods before gods existed, effectively, or the race that created the galaxy and like the humans and the Eldari and stuff like that. So the most ancient people in the galaxy created this now. Yeah,
this is, I think, again at some point because. Yeah, in Battlefleet Gothic, you could have either an Imperial Blackstone Fortress or a Chaos Blackstone Fortress. An Imperial Blackstone Fortress was basically a Blackstone Fortress that they hadn't worked out how to turn on properly. And a Chaos Blackstone Fortress was one where they went, "Oh yeah, that's cool, we've chaosed it," and then it was crazy.
Weren't they all like gifts, though? They were gifts from the Chaos gods to Chaos.
They were all found or taken over in some way.
Yeah.
And I think Abaddon had a bunch of them, and then he gifted them to some of his top boys to do with as they wanted. And I think he kept a bunch of them for himself, and obviously used one against Cadia.
The thing is with these as well, these Blackstone Fortresses, I think, they were originally as well tied to the Elder original narrative when they had the war in the skies or whatever it was, or a war in the heavens against the Catan, as with the old ones combined with against the whatever the Necrons used to be called, the Necron
Necrontyr.
Yeah, whatever that was. But yeah, so because at some point I think it was supposed to be potentially like a incredible elder weapon that was like of their pinnacle of their technology and so on and so forth. But then obviously they've gone to old ones, and then there was this whole period of time during I think the Eye of Terror campaign where Eldred Olfran tried to pit his mind against a Blackstone Fortress that was possessed by a chaos god, and then Eldred Olfran died. But then they went, no, we can't come up with another name for a good farce here. Bring it back. Don't worry about that.
Well, it's often because Blackstone Fortresses are very like pyramid shaped, which to me makes them look Necron, but then they also look chaosy. Yeah, it's just weird that there's like a mix of like design cues from the original, and they've kind of kept that original design in. They haven't redone it at all, which they could have. They could have just made it look completely different.
I'm starting to feel that the old ones are now becoming the GW MacGuffin for. Why is it?
They've already got. They've got Belisarius Cawl. I thought he was their new MacGuffin maker.
It's Cypher, isn't it? He was like, oh, everything's gone to pot. Everything's fallen to pieces. Oh, don't worry, Cypher's turned up and killed everyone, but he's left. So carry on as you were.
I think everything in current 40k narrative story writing is just a series of new MacGuffins, isn't it? It's like there's Belisarius Cawl, he's fixed that, and now Guilliman's here, and because Guilliman's here, he did something years ago, and now Primaris Marines are here, and Guilliman saved everyone. Don't worry about that. So Guilliman, well done him. And then there was that God of Death thing. I mean, that just happened. Well done. That also has a part to play in everything. And now Blackstone Fortress is, I don't know. So I don't know, man. But anyway, around, in terms of game, I agree with you, Joe, when you were talking about it's a lot of rules. And that is quite concerning to me. So, like, my wife has played Silver Tower, Right? She sort of went, I don't really want to ever get too involved in all this Warhammer nonsense. But she was kind of okay with Silver Tower because it was quite an easy game to kind of be like, hey, rules are pretty simple. It's, it's just us going through a dungeon, doing all that stuff. It's fun. And it was, but I think if I introduced her to this, she'd be like, I'm sorry, what are we doing now? Why is that a thing? Oh, God, what's going on now? It's just that extra layer on top, which is totally cool for players like us who want to really delve into the depth. My issue is, though, will I really ever dive into the depth and do a proper campaign of this, or will we play one or two games where we go, oh yeah, that was fun for the evening, but we'll never do that again kind of vibe. So, yeah, I don't know. I mean, I'm very excited for it. I think it's got some beautiful models, as we already talked about. I think overall the game looks promising, and I think depth is not a bad thing because it means that the game can be more rewarding for us to play more and more. Silver Tower did definitely start to feel a little bit samey after a while, so I think this depth does create a lot more potential fun.
Yeah, there's already been talk of expansions and stuff like that. So hopefully we'll get like new explorer models and new tiles, new baddies.
Well, I can imagine they'd do what they did with Silver Tower and just do like a pack of explorer cards for pre-existing models that you can just port in from 40k into this game, as well as obviously creating new ones.
Would they? Because that kind of like fell on its face, didn't it? And they didn't really sell many.
I don't know about that. The deck of Explorer cards.
Oh, no, it did all right. I mean, they're actually quite sought after now. Sean was asking for those. Sean being another one of the friends that we play games with somewhat regularly. He was super keen to get hold of them because they're like real hard to come across now. But obviously, I mean, that could be a reflection of the fact they didn't sell very many of them. But yeah, no, I mean, I managed to get them and I thought they were really fantastic. I mean, I foolishly as well paid whatever it was to unlock everything on the app because I was super into Silver Tower when it came out. But anyway, There you go.
Well, there's some other cool mechanics that they've done. So you've got this thing called the status chamber and data bank, and they're just like little slip cards that you can, or like little vacuum, almost like food bags that you can put all your character cards in and cards that you are from playing your game. Seal them away so they're all safe and you're not mixing anyone up for when you want to then come back in a few weeks' time. Play the game again and you've not mucked anything up. And then you've got this hidden vault card as well. So there's a mysterious envelope within the game that you can only open up once you've completed it. Once you've completed like the main quest, I guess. So it'd be interesting to see what will be in that as well.
Would it be like play it again backwards?
Well, I wonder if it's a few cards that you either like add into the game, or if it explains some narrative, or maybe tells you to go to the website. And as Dan was saying to me a couple of days ago, maybe takes you to another website where you get like one of those cool animated videos explaining like the story, because you've got the Games Workshop have released a bunch of those animations for like introducing the characters and the initial like setting of the scene. So it almost makes sense for there to be somewhere where you can see the end of the story, because they've sort of been quite upfront and said this will progress the storyline. The Blackstone Fortress is clearly going to play a part in the larger 40k like timeline and the story that's progressing. And that.
So that's what Abaddon's going around collecting them all, isn't he? He loves him a Blackstone Fortress.
Exactly. I'm surprised he's not going to come for this one.
Maybe he will.
Well,
I mean, obviously the Black Legion are there.
Well, yeah, you've got the mini Abaddon model, who's also a really lovely model, who looks very much like him.
He's technically down 2 at the moment, because he used one as a giant battering ram, and then he gave one to Human Blackheart, didn't he?
Yeah. Well, what I could see as an expansion is, so there was this piece of artwork that they released, and it's the Black Legion guy, like, I can't remember what his name is, that his character, his entire ship had crashed into or somehow melded into the Blackstone Fortress, so that is actually part of the ship now. So I wouldn't be too surprised if they do a more generic tile set that is representing this Chaos Space Hulk, which again would sort of solve the sort of issue I was saying earlier, was the tiles on face value look a bit too abstract. So it'd be interesting if there's a sort of more generic setting, which again is exactly what they did with Silver Tower. So you have Silver Tower, and then they did the Shadows over Hammerhole, which is a much more classic dungeon for people that complained that Silver Tower was a bit too odd.
Do we think, though, as well, because one of the things that was really mad about Silver Tower, I always thought, was the way that they introduced the ability to take parties made up of heroes from all sorts of different factions. So you could have orcs and other forms of chaos and Skaven and all that stuff. So do you think that we'll see a scenario where you could add an orc to your party, or a Necron, or any other of the sort of, maybe even a Gene Stealer, right? I mean, do you think they'll do that?
Maybe not Gene Stealer, but
Gene Stealer Cole.
True.
I mean, there are examples of the original lore where Gene Stealers were running away from the hive mind and essentially were conversing with like a local imperial, community somewhere. And then once the hive mind came into range, they immediately then were re-indoctrinated in and started then attacking around the thing. But apparently there could be an example of, say, I don't know, a Gene Stealer that's broken free of the hive mind, and he's quite the intellectual, as it were. He could be modelled reading a book and wearing a top hat and a monocle. Wouldn't that be wonderful?
Yeah.
I can imagine they're just going to do what they did with Silver Tower. So they've released the initial set of adventurers, which are all relatively aligned to each other, and you can justifiably say they will hang out together. And then they just release a pack of cards, which are for anything like 40k.
I don't think that will happen, because the characters they've released are all generally quite weak characters. Like, none of them's like superpowered. If you throw a bunch of Space Marines in the mix, then they'll just storm ahead, gunning everyone down with relative ease. The challenge of the game will then disappear, because there's only two Chaos Space Marines and a Chaos Space Marine Lord. Like, they're like the big bads of the game, like to watch out for. If you throw in a Space Marine chaplain and a Necron Lord, they'll just smash everyone out of the way.
Yeah, true, but I mean, that depends on if they actually scale the game based on what those should be in the lore versus what they just want to let them be in the game because they want to let people play whatever they want to play in these scenarios. I think Games Workshop's general philosophy when it comes to game design now is just to give people what they want, which is the ability to take their Space Marines or whatever else it is and just go, well, we'll just balance it accordingly so as it seems representational of a fun gameplay experience. So although I agree with you, it would be a shame not to represent their kind of relative power level within the fluff. I don't necessarily see that as something that will be a big issue in the grand scheme of things.
If they released a pack of cards that were like, here's all characters, if people wanted to theme their own expeditions to say, let's take all a bunch of Necrons, or let's take all a bunch of orcs, you can do that. But then, of course, you could just take an orc and a Gene Stealer and a Space Marine. And, that makes no sense narratively, but that's your choice. If you want to do that, it's not something that they've constructed for you to do. The team that they've constructed for you to take is very, a rogue trader, an elf, not elf, an Eldari. But they all relatively sort of a mishmash that could work within the lore, but still being quite diverse in terms of the ensemble of characters that you're taking.
No, agreed. Well then, I reckon that's enough of us talking about the game itself and then the assorted extra bits that we kind of got on. I mean, there was sort of game stuff at the heart of it. We're really excited to play it at some point. We are also potentially going to do an unboxing for this. The game comes out
on Black Friday, so the 23rd.
That's coming out on the 23rd of November. Blackstone Friday. Well done them. That's a much better job than they did on October. Orcs didn't even come out until November, so good on them. But yeah, no, I think we're looking forward to doing some actual gameplay of that, and maybe kind of following up on this and actually talking about our actual experience playing the game. But like I say, our hope is we'll get hold of a copy soon and be able to do an unboxing for all you guys on our YouTube channel, probably around the day of launch. Because although our good friends at Triple Helix are nice enough to give us this stuff, they don't really tend to do it until the thing's more or less out. Meaning that, you know, it's a bit of a scramble for us, but yeah, look forward to that. If we do it, it will probably be up on the channel at some point on the 23rd, if at all.
Dan spent a lot of money. He spent a lot of our budget on new equipment, so the video will probably be far surpass me with a slightly off-angled camera in a tiny photo booth.
There you go.
So,
we can try out the green screen, Joe. Imagine that.
yeah. Imagine the magic of cinema.
Oh, it's going to be great. I also like the fact that you sort of roped it in saying it was our collective budget. I mean, obviously, if you're keen to contribute to the costs, I'm more than happy to take your donations.
Well, check's in the post, mate.
Oh, is it? Oh, brilliant. I can't wait. I'll look forward to that. Anyway, there you go. That's a bit of Blackstone Fortress things. We're going to move on to the next segment. So here are some transitional sounds, courtesy of Joe. Come on, Joe.
Woo!
Alright guys, so after all that chat about games and the models, this being a 40k podcast, we felt like we probably should try and talk about the implications that this game has on 40k. And believe it or not, it does, because there's a whole heap of rules for everything in this box set that affects 40k. And for today, I'm going to take on the role of what normally Joe does, and pick 3 things I like out of the Blackstone Codex, shall we, or Blackstone Fortress Codex, shall we call it. What's the actual official title of this book that's in Blackstone Fortress? Joe, do you know?
The official book.
Well, it's, the name of the book. What's its title?
Just data sheets, isn't it? Or something?
Oh, yeah, probably it's just database sheets. So the data
Something
sheet Blackstone.
very unexciting.
Well, there you go. But anyway, we have been able, through the crafty means of internet communications, get pictures of all the different units, and I've read through them all. And I've tried to evaluate what I think are actually going to be useful units in matched play, which is obviously something that we focus on quite a bit. Obviously, in narrative and open play, there's actually probably better units within this, but I've tried to kind of look at it through the filter of would you actually consider or could this work in a match play format. So, yeah, I think that's pretty fairly understood. Any initial questions, gents, before I tell you my first selection?
Can you do this without ranting?
Yeah, I think so. I mean, to be honest with you, I mean, I'll get it out of the way in the initial instance. The challenging thing about picking stuff from this book is that so much of this stuff has keywords that have absolutely nothing to do with current codexes or current factions. So the problem that you have with these units in almost all instances is that they effectively can't be used in most match play scenarios because, in accordance with Games Workshop's interpretation of the soup rules, if you were to take one of these things, you couldn't in turn have a battle-forged army because your army that it seems natural that this thing would fit within hasn't got any kind of, at least at this moment in time, doesn't have any kind of FAQs or erratas or, you know, any kind of reference that taking this doesn't affect your, you know, Battleforge status, which is super interesting when actually thinking about this in match play, because actually there's some stuff in there that you'd say like is really strong, but it just doesn't have a place in the game. So, for example, there's a Traitor Guardsman unit that actually, for the price of admission, is really good. It's like a 7-man unit, good mix of weapons, really cheap. I think it's 35 points for the 7 men. In fact, I know it is because I've got it in front of me here, which is really good for what it is. You just can't put it in anything because it doesn't have any of the relevant keywords to be taken in a Chaos Space Marine army. Obviously, you could potentially get away with it, potentially, if you take the the Astra Militarum variant that's the cult.
Could you take 3 units of them?
Yeah, you could do, but then
with another character from here with the same keyword?
So yeah, there are also limitations to the amount of these things that you can take in your army. So you could take 2 units of those, and then I think you can get away with taking the 2 Chaos Space Marines. Then you need to take the Chaos Lord and all the rest of it. But it becomes a completely different faction in that regard. So it's really limiting in terms of what you can actually use, which is an interesting aspect of everything. So with all those caveats said, I'm going to start with the first of the units that I think is potentially quite interesting, which is the 2 Rattling Twins, that being Ren and Rus, which I'm probably butchering the pronunciation of. But these 2 little rattling guys have a movement of 6, which is actually quite good by rattling standards. I think that's 1 more than a regular rattling potentially, but we'll leave that where it is. They have a weapon skill of 5+. Ballistic skill of 2+, their strength 2, toughness 2, 2 wounds, 1 attack, leadership 6, and a 6+ save. Nothing to write home about in terms of the profile, except obviously that ballistic skill of 2+, because it won't surprise you to hear that this unit contains 2 models. Ren is armed with a sniper rifle and stub pistol. Russ is armed with a stub pistol and demolition charge. Only one of this unit can be included in your army. Shock horror. They fill the elite slot, and points-wise, they're crazy efficient at a cheap 35 points. So you have, in this elite option here, 1 sniper rifle, which is range 36, heavy 1, strength 4, with the usual sniper rule of any 6s is resolved as a mortal wound in addition to a regular wound. The stub pistol, which is pistol 1, strength 4, 1 damage, and then you also have the demo charge, which is a terrifying weapon if you can get it in range, which is range 6, grenade D6, strength 8, -3, D3 damage. For 35 points, you've got potential to do serious damage to something. If you luck out and roll a 6 with this thing, you're hitting on 2s, you're wounding most vehicles on 3s, you've got -3 against it. I mean, you do that, you pull that off next to a Bane Blade or some other big vehicle, you're going to do real big chunks of damage out of that, which is...
Well, what's interesting with him is he's on the grappling hook as well, that ignore vertical movement. So if you had him, say, hiding out at the top of the building, but then as soon as something a bit nasty you wanted to kill went past, you can just drop down for free, and then be within range of chucking you a grenade. And then if he dies afterwards, that doesn't matter because you've done his main job.
Yeah, absolutely. And, the grapple hook edition is fantastic. So the special rules they come with is find the best spot. So find the best spot is instead of deploying as normal, you can wait until both armies are fully deployed and then place them anywhere on the battlefield that is more than 18 away from any enemy model. If both players have units with ability like this, they should roll off and the winner chooses who will set up first. Now, obviously, that is an interesting rule, I suppose, in and of itself, because at the moment, I believe, in the current kind of FAQ scenario, it's specifically stated that if you have an ability that would be Deep Strike, you have to come in turn 2. But this is obviously after the big FAQ, so obviously has taken all of those rules into account. So, and obviously what they've also done is increase the range of that, kind of denial area to 18, which clearly obviously indicates that these guys can still, after everything's deployed, be put somewhere to best kind of serve your needs.
I think this will be FAQ'd to say, because basically everything that had that infiltrate rule now has the Vanguard move, so it's set up in your deployment, but you get a free 9-inch move at the beginning of your game, before the game turn 1 starts. So it might be, because chances are Black Library was shipped and printed and getting boxed well before the big FAQ happened or got printed. So I wouldn't be surprised if there's a bunch of FAQs tweaking this rule specifically to be more in line with all the others. I mean, if it doesn't, that'd be quite interesting, because then it's one of the few units in the game that gets that ability to drop down anywhere before the game starts.
Well, the thing is with that as well, though, is they've doubled the range of the deployment parameters. So essentially, I can see this staying as it is. And also what's really interesting about this as a rule is they now do not count towards your drops, because it doesn't state that you put them in reserves. It just states that you can choose to deploy them after everything else. So unlike in other instances where you go, you can choose to put this in reserves and it comes down, in this it's instead of deploying red and rust normally, you can wait until both armies are fully deployed and then choose to put them down. So the wording of that probably needs an FAQ, but nonetheless, really, really nice little rule for these guys that gives them just that extra bit of opportunity. Joe, how are you feeling about all that on this side of things at the minute, man? All good?
I think it's all good. I don't think they will get FAQ'd because of the distance that they are like away, but they can't be within 9.
They're also not like close combat monsters, and pretty much everything they've got nerfed in that respect, with things like electro priests that are just going to knock you off turn 1, whereas this is like such a niche unit and quite
and they're also heavy. And also I like the fact that they've got the immediately after making the shooting attack they can move, which is very old school Eldar.
You're getting ahead of me down there, Joe. You're getting ahead. But yes, you are right. It's the shoot sharp and Scarpa rule, which is essentially immediately after making a shooting attack with either of these two guys, other than firing Overwatch, of course, that model can move as if it were the movement phase, though they obviously, well, not obviously, but they can't advance as part of that move. But that's also really good with the movement of 6 and the ability as well. I mean, think about this, right? You ignore vertical terrain with that grapple hook, right? So, I mean, again, you can come down. Admittedly, you can only throw the demo charge, the demolition charge, once per game. It's a once per game ability. But you can throw that demolition charge, do a load of damage to some big kind of like, be it Imperial Knight or Baneblade or even a Dreadnought or whatever, and then you can move immediately afterwards, ignoring vertical distances. So you could literally just sort of come down, throw a grenade, in the movement phase, come down off of the top of the building, throw this demo charge, and then zip line out to safety. Basically, he's Batman.
Brilliant. That's what you want.
Rattling
Batman. Teeny tiny Batman.
Additionally, they are naturally stealthy, so if they are in cover, they receive a 2+ benefit of 2 rather than 1. It's a standard kind of sniper fare, but it means they do have a 4-up save in cover, which makes them slightly more survivable. They've also all good so far. Any other all happy on that? Another ability they have is you go high, I'll go low. But the first time this unit is set up on the battlefield, both models must be placed in unit coherency with each other. From that point onwards, each operates independently and is treated as a separate unit. So obviously you get the two guys, you put them down together, and then from there on in, they can just operate entirely independently of each other, which is super cool also. So it gives them a huge amount of versatility there. And obviously don't forget, these guys have the character keyword. So they're little, tiny little, annoying little units that you can just chuck into your army, and they just can scamper around causing all sorts of trouble, which is, it's super interesting. So that's cool. The grappling hook we've already talked about, and then the rattling twins. You can reroll failed hit and wound rolls when shooting with Ren Sniper Rifle if the target is also visible to Russ. So if you have line of sight with the man with the demo charge, you can re-roll your sniper. So you've got 2+ re-rolling ones.
That's great.
Yeah. They're a really cheap elite choice as well.
35 points, which is
So if you're struggling to fill a vanguard for a guard detachment, or you need a cheap elite to finish off that brigade, then they're a perfect choice for you, really.
Yeah. And the thing is about this guy, the reason why I've definitely included these guys is they have all the correct keywords to be put in a regular guard army. They are Imperium, Astra Militarum, Militarum Auxilia as well as one of their keywords. But they are completely legal in an Astra Militarum army of any variant. So there's no complexities or issues with them just being put in an army. And as Joe's correctly said, a 35-point elite choice is crazy valuable. The amount of times I've put armies together and I get to that kind of, if we're playing 1750, I get beyond the 1700 point mark and I'm on 1710, 1715, and I start going, oh, what am I actually going to upgrade, or what am I going to bolster to get myself up to this? If I'm a guardsman player, I'm just going to go, whatever, let's just stick in these two. Done. Really nice, effective unit, and definitely something I think they've just got loads of really great rules. Honestly, I think they're one of the better things from this for 40k purposes, certainly for guard players. What do you reckon, Phil? You're our resident guard expert. Would you consider putting these in your army?
No, because they're abhumans and they're filthy scum that do not deserve to be within and alongside the Krieg.
Thanks for killing the theory.
Oh, really?
But I mean, if I was playing a regular Imperial Guard guy, then yeah, why not? They're great models.
Would you could create some Krieg-sized ones, like you could model them to just to utilize the rules, if you will.
Well, weirdly, I've seen quite a few people in the Krieg Facebook group just create Krieg snipers and just obviously play them as Rattlings, or even like Elysian snipers, I guess, but most likely Rattlings. Just because they look really good when you've given them a cloak and a little sniper gun.
No, agreed.
I think if I was to take any, it probably would be the Navigator, because I like the ability to have some psychic power, which I can't normally have, and sort of it still thematically fits in with the army, or the Ministorum Priest, or the lady with the chainsaw flamer, because they're a bit more...
The problem is with all of those, and again, it's going to come down to what they FAQ and interpret, is that those cannot be used, to the best of my knowledge, with your army in a legal sense in 40k. So if you were to look at, say, the Ministorum Priest, there are obviously specific rules for Ministorum Priests in the Astra Militarum book. But those Ministorum Priests also have the Astra Militarum keyword in there. I keep forgetting the name of the dude, but the guy with the wire up his nose. That's I'm just scrolling up looking for the entry now.
Janus.
Yeah, that guy. He doesn't have Astra Militarum in his keywords, and he's not specifically a Militarum Priest, even though he has that as a subtitle, as a additional title. So it's going to
Did they release 40k rules for the Rogue Trader lady from the Rogue Trader game?
Yes.
Yeah.
So if they release another Rogue Trader model, you could, in theory, make a Supreme Command detachment of Rogue Traders.
Yes, in theory you could. Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, absolutely. That
Well, surely. Oh, I was going to say they're not, because they had the troops for the Rogue Trader game that would clearly be of the same faction. But
no, they're their own faction again. There's some. You'd have forgive me. You'd have to get me. I'd have to drag out the book and check all that. But they're like some very specific variant.
Because they were Starstrider faction, weren't they?
Is it Starstrider? That was what I wanted to say, but I wasn't confident.
And she was as well, because the Rogue Trader team is all together. But I don't know if she's got a generic Rogue Trader faction keyword.
Yeah, the general consensus is, for the purposes of having a battle forged unit, is you need one unifying. You need an additional unifying keyword in addition to Imperium in this instance. So you need Imperium Adeptus Astartes or Imperium Astra Militarum in order to maintain that legality in army list terms. Now, there is obviously, as you correctly say, for Ministorum Priests, for example, they call them out specifically, but in the Codex they specifically call out Ministorum Priest. They don't call out this guy, and he doesn't have exactly the same keywords. So it's open to interpretation how that works. I would argue that whatever, if you want to use this guy, do it. But I'll be honest with you, I also didn't actually think he was that much better than a regular Ministorum Priest, other than the fact that he had a weird servo skull with a heavy stubber, or a regular stubber that ranged 12 pistol stubber thing. And he has a power maul, which is probably better than they usually have a chainsaw. Yeah. So that's probably better as well, but he's 50 points, which is, in every other way, he's a Ministorum Priest. I mean, by all means, use this model instead of a generic minister and priest model and whatever. But yeah, I'm not. It was difficult to completely get on board with him. The Imperial Navigator again follows the same problem. It's got, I think it's Navis Nobility or Navis Nobility. Again, it's a completely different keyword, so you can't put it in an Astra Militarum army and make it legal in matched play.
Well, surely you can take him as an extra detachment.
Oh yeah, completely. You could take him as an independent operative or whatever it is and lose 1 CP for the privilege. But
Well, yeah, auxiliary, detachment. That's the only way to add these guys in, I think.
yeah, absolutely. What I find really funny is they've got these spindle drones, and their keywords is Blackstone Construct and Unaligned. And obviously from the terminology, you'd go, oh, unaligned, I could put it with anything. But obviously with the way the rules work, it's not that sophisticated that you can derive meaning from a keyword. You only need to match that keyword. So saying unaligned, you could go, oh, I'll put this in my Eldari army.
Well, actually, sorry to interrupt, but buildings, I'm pretty sure, have an unaligned keyword, which is why they can be taken by any faction. So I assume then that the same logic is because they're unaligned, they can go with any faction. Now, that probably needs an FAQ just to clarify, but
Yeah.
check buildings. I'm pretty sure they're all unaligned.
Yeah, they are. You are correct on that. But again, they have specific rules stating what that means, whereas the keyword doesn't necessarily unlock that within the rules itself. And that's, I think, one of the nuanced issues with the keyword system is there is this implied logic that keywords also unlock rules and abilities, but it's not specifically spelt out, except in the case of Fly, which is one of the few instances, sorry, Psyker. Psyker and Fly have rules implications. Other than that, it's a meaningless word, essentially, in the purposes of how it's interpreted in rules. But anyway, we digress massively. The point is those two little rattling snipers, I think, are well good. The next guy I want to call out is our Kroot Tracker, good old Dayaka. I can't remember how to pronounce his name. But again, this guy can be taken in a Tau army. There is no restrictions to using this. He has the keywords Tau Empire and Kroot. And what you get for a considerably small amount of points, I mean, if you think 35 points is cheap for your two little rattling snipers, 20 points for this guy is a complete bargain. So what you're getting here is a movement of 7, which is solid. Weapon skill and ballistic skill 3+, which again, solid. Strength and toughness 3, which is obviously nothing special, but, not terrible. 3 wounds, 3 attacks, leadership 7, and a 6+ save. He's a single model armed with a Kroot rifle and Kroot pistol. Only one of this model can be included in your army. Kroot pistol is it's basically a bolt pistol. It's range 12, pistol 1. Strength 4, no AP, 0 AP, damage 1. The Kroot rifle in shooting is, again, a bolt gun. Range 24, strength 4, 1 damage, no minus modifiers on AP. And then the melee variant, which is strength +1, 1 damage, which again is pretty universally useful across the board, but not anything especially special. All happy so far?
Mm-hmm.
Cool.
Yep.
So in terms of abilities, he's got Tracker. During deployment, you can set up, I'm not going to pronounce the name again, the Kroot Tracker in pursuit instead of placing him on the battlefield. At the end of any of your movement phases, he can reveal his hiding place and attack. Set him up anywhere on the battlefield that is more than 9 away from enemy models. So again, he's just an infiltrating unit that you can leave off the game for potentially till turn 3 if you want. And then he has another special rule, which is his quarry can't hide. He can target an enemy character even if they're not the closest enemy unit, which, again, pretty useful on that one. And then concealed booby traps. Once per battle, at the end of your opponent's movement phase, you can choose an enemy unit on the battlefield and roll a d6. Subtract 1 from the result if the unit is a character, but add 1 to the unit. Add 1 if the unit contains 10 or more models. On a 4+, that unit suffers D3 mortal wounds. On a 7+, it suffers D6 mortal wounds, which again, really strong
Super useful.
For 20 points, people. I mean, literally bonkers. You can literally, if you're building again, same logic as what we were talking about with Rattlings. You got 20 points, and you're playing Tau. I'll just chuck him in, see what he does. Again, he's either going to be... let me finish off with his last ability. Fieldcraft, if he's receiving the benefits of cover, he gets +2 rather than +1. So again, 4-up save in cover. Universally good, I'd say. I think 20 points fills out most army lists really, really comfortably. He's nothing to shout about in terms of his abilities or his weapons, but it's just the versatility of him that's a real pain in the bum. Like, if you've got that last wound on a character, the fact that this guy could take 2 shots at him within 12 inches, or potentially go up to him with this booby trap thing and do him for a mortal wound on a 4+, is really potentially quite strong, because, you know, this guy's just got the potential to hide away off the table, turn up, and then just do something. Maybe that's control an objective. Maybe that's get someone off an objective. Maybe that's just, you know, turn up and booby trap a unit or whatever it is. But you're talking about a unit here that just has huge amounts of versatility, huge amounts of flexibility. He's a little bit of a pain in the bum to deal with because he's still a character. And he's 20 points. I mean, that just seems like all sorts of value to me.
It's 20 points for a free smite, if anything.
Yeah. Well, a 4+ smite.
Yeah.
Which, again, though, I mean, you know, if you're doing it against a unit of, say, orcs, for example, that are, you know, numbering 10 or more, if you manage to roll that 7, that's D6 mortal wounds, which is, you know, I mean, 20 points to potentially do D6 mortal wounds to a unit is pretty tidy, I think.
Yeah. And again, it's still that it's just filling out a detachment. And like, how many Tau players take Supreme Command detachment? I've got 20 points left over. I'll check in an extra elite into my Supreme Command. Bomb. Done. Yeah,
exactly. I mean, that's the thing. I mean, that kind of versatility, that kind of flexibility that a 20-point unit, an elite unit, gives you is crazy useful. So yeah, what do you reckon, Phil?
Yeah, sounds pretty good. Nice ability, and like you said, nice and cheap.
There you go, boom boom. And then for my very last unit, now I have to be honest with you, this is one of those units that, in the grand scheme of things, it goes against the initial rules that I kind of spelled out from the beginning, which is that I was only going to be interested in units that, you know, potentially you could take in regular armies. This isn't one of those, but you could potentially... It's one of those really awkward situations where this is sort of good enough that you might want to do something to work it around, which is the Rogue Psyker. Now, the Rogue Psyker, unlike everything else I talked about here, it has the Chaos keyword, but then it has Servants of the Abyss, which is not obviously Heretic Astartes or Chaos Demons. It's a completely different keyword. Now, if you were to take, you know, the Chaos Lord with Thunderhammer and Plasma Gun, you can do some bits and pieces around utilizing these in different ways. But funny story, I actually think the Chaos Lord with Thunderhammer and Plasma Pistols probably one of the weaker units in terms of 40k match play, because he's a Chaos Lord with really expensive war gear, and as good as that can be, he's also only locked to the Black Legion, which probably at the moment isn't one of the strongest Legion traits you can take. Certainly not anything close to Death Guard or World Eaters, or even Iron Warriors, right? I think Black Legion, again, forgive me if I'm wrong, but I think is it additional leadership and some other stuff? It's nothing that incredible from what I remember.
I think you get to move and class rapid fire weapons as assault. I don't know, I haven't got the codex near me.
No, that's fine, neither do I. But nonetheless, the point is that you very rarely see a Black Legion army in competitive play because they're just not that competitive. So that Chaos Lord isn't much to shout about. But these Rogue Psychers, I think, is, and I think there's ways to make them work just because they're cheap, as has been the overriding theme of this. But they're also Psychers, which is hugely valuable. So if you can indulge me, let me explain. They are Movement 6, Weapon Skill 4, Ballistic Skill 4, Strength 3, Toughness 3, 4 wounds. 4. I think they've made a mistake there, but all right, 4 wounds. 2 attacks, leadership 8, and a 5+ save. So they've had a better save than every other thing that we talked about up to this point. A Rogue Psyker is a single model armed with a las pistol and a Chaos Stave. No more than 2 of these models can be included in your army is an important caveat, so that you will need to find another elites option to fill it out if you're going Vanguard. But I think there are some. I'll get back to that in a second. But las pistol is a las pistol. Most people should know what that means, but it's a 12-inch range pistol 1, strength 3, damage 1. And the Chaos Stave is strength user -1 AP and D3 damage. Psychic weapons. Wibbly. So it's got Servants of the Abyss, which is the kind of consistent keyword and or ability that runs throughout most of the Chaos stuff in this set. So Servants of the Abyss is an ability that has no effect unless your army includes Obsidious Malex. I'm assuming is how we pronounce his name. Anyone want to hazard a guess at another pronunciation?
I think that's probably right.
That probably works. We'll go with Obsidious
I'm not
Malex.
going to risk it.
Yeah. Are you going to risk it, Joe? Are you going to try?
I said, I'm not going to risk it.
Oh,
No, I look like a fool.
Not again. If it does, you cannot set up any units with this ability before you have set up Obsidious Malex. When you set up Obsidious Malex during deployment, all units with this ability are immediately set up at the same time, which obviously is useful because it means you can obviously one-drop this kind of blob of stuff. When you set up Obsidious Malex on the battlefield for the first time, all units with this ability must be set up within 6 of him, or they must all be set up in the same transport as him. If they cannot be set up, they count as being destroyed, which is a bit of a downer. But there you go. But you're probably never going to take that guy, so I wouldn't worry about that. Then they have the ability of Unrestrained Power. You can re-roll any dice roll of a 1 when taking a psychic test for this model. However, this model suffers Perils of the Warp on any psychic test that is double, not just double 1 or double 6. So it's got a lot of risks associated to it, because any double will cause you to perils, which is a problem. But you got 4 wounds, and it's a small price to pay for the fact that you can actually re-roll 1s, which actually is hugely beneficial because it gives you that really increased chance to summon Smite, which is obviously the power you're going to be using to most of the things. I mean, what do you guys think of that?
I think he's really good. How many points was the Rogue Psyker for the 4-year-old one? Is he better comparably to that one?
That sounds like a Phil question. Phil, do you remember how much the old Rogue Psyker was?
No, but I could look it up. Actually, the thing is, I think it went up in points in the FAQ, so it probably...
Didn't it go to something like 70 points or something like that?
Yeah, it got really expensive.
So, yeah.
So, I mean, again, just to state, these guys are coming in at 30 points each.
Nice. They're also damn cool models. They're like one of my favorites.
Yeah, gorgeous models as well. I might as well say as well, they're slaves to Malex, so if your army is Battleforged, this unit does not take up slots in the detachment that includes Obsidious Malex. Which again is interesting, I suppose, because if you did take him in a solo operative, whatever it is thing, technically you could put 2 of these in as well as him. Because they don't take up slots, so you could put it in that way for -1, but then you still got to pay the 102 points for Obsidious Malex, which is... I mean, maybe not that bad a choice if you're getting 2 of these guys, because they are pretty damn solid. But yeah, it's interesting. I thought they were good enough that it was worth talking about. And just for everyone's reference, they can attempt to manifest 1 psychic power in each friendly psychic phase and attempt to deny 1 psychic power in each enemy psychic phase, and they know Smite. So they're basically just, Smite spamming units. But they're cheap. They're relatively durable with 4 wounds. Again, I'm going to say it as a disgruntled elder player. This is a fantastic example of everything that's wrong with a warlock. Warlocks have yet again been given the short end of the stick with the addition of this unit, because it's yet again another efficient psyker with a decent quantity of wounds that has a lot of potential versatile options, whereas a warlock is way too expensive. But I won't get on that high horse again. But yeah, that's one of the units I felt was... those are the 3 units that I feel like potentially you could start to see in match play games, if not just because they're cheap and fill out detachments, and again, are just interesting. They've got versatility to them. They've got options. I think they're very interesting potential things that I could see some people just throwing in. It's like when old Imperial Guard players always used to throw in random Marbos because he would just turn up and throw a demo charge and then die. It's that kind of logic. For the price of admission, you kind of just would. And a lot of 40k players are going to have these models, because I see a lot of people buying these Blackstone Fortress games. So yeah, that would be my my 3 favourite, bestest, most interesting units for Blackstone Fortress in 40k.
Way
Happy times. Well, I think that's enough of that nonsense. Shall we move on to the final segment of the show where we talk to Tim about his GT Army list? Get him back on.
Yeah.
Let's get back.
Let's do that. Phil, come on, I haven't heard a transitional noise out of you yet.
Put some more effort in, man. Jeez.
He's so tired. It's like, please let it end. I want to go to bed.
Welcome back, guys. Now we're going to talk about Tim's GT Army. Just a quick recap for anyone who doesn't know or haven't listened to the previous podcast. We're all off to the Warhammer World GT Heat 3, which is in less than a month now, because it's starting off, I think it's the 10th or 11th of December, something like that. We'll all be going, and obviously on previous episodes, Dan, Joe, and myself have all talked about our lists, and we've also got a couple of extra people coming with us. So we've got Tim, who's with us today. Hello, Tim.
Hello.
It is a terrifying prospect, by the way, when you say it's less than a month away. I remember I was having this conversation with Joe not too long ago, where I was like, it's only 5 weeks away, Joe. And he was like, I'm sorry, what? I've got so much to paint. So much to do.
If I wasn't driving, strapped to a seat, I would have fallen off my seat from shock. Possibly cried a little bit.
Thank goodness you didn't lose consciousness and proceed to smash off the side of the road. That would have filled me with almost the smallest amount of guilt.
Or just annoyance of the noise that he's going to add to the podcast.
Leave poor Joe alone. He's had enough of a hard time today. He's busy. He's a busy man.
He is a busy man.
So Tim,
I'm going to replace my pin drill with a pneumatic drill.
Okay.
Not that I'm using a drill whilst doing the podcast.
Phil, I think you should just carry on and ignore what he's saying.
Okay, Tim. So before you talk us through your list, tell me how much of it is already painted and how much have you got to go?
All of it's painted.
Oh, brilliant.
Yep. I purposely put this list together so that it was fully painted. I just didn't want to be under any sort of stress coming up to the GT. Although now I want to change my list. It's like, do I try and squeeze something extra in? But I'm not sure.
See, I made the mistake of last week talking about a list where I realised I needed to paint quite a lot, and that's probably not going to happen. So the list that I talked about last week, which was a really, reasonably good list, I think I'll just have to completely change because I'll have to just go with the stuff that I've got painted.
Yeah, sure. I think this is always the way with the hobby, though. It's like you dream of a list, and it's like, yes, I'm going to work towards this, and you get there, and then you got a bit of spare time, and the GT's coming up, and you're like, maybe I could just squeeze in this, and then you start tinkering away at your list, and then before you know it, you've rewritten half your list, and then you're off buying another 50 models, and you're like, why did I ever think this was a good idea? Why? Why am I doing this to myself?
You wouldn't sympathise with that at all, would you, Joe?
Not at all. The fact that
just mad up.
It's completely redundant, me sitting down and doing that, what I'm taking to the GT thing, because my army's completely changed. Because I took it to an event, I got tabled 2 out of 3 games, and I was like, this is a terrible army. And,
sorry, Tim.
No, I was going to say, I think for me, because I expect to be king of the bottom tables, I don't put too much pressure on myself when making like an ass-kicking list. I just want to hopefully win 1 or 2 games, if that makes sense.
Yeah. I wasn't really looking for an ass-kicking list. I was just looking for a list that had models on the table at the end of turn 6.
That's so much to ask for. I mean,
the world we live in today.
I know. On my side of things, the only massive difference between the army that I said I was going to take and the army I am now taking is the fact that I swapped out my Crimson Hunters for Hemlocks again, because they're just too good. And as I kind of went into hideous amounts of detail last episode, I really like them, so they're back in. But there you go. But yeah, definitely Joe, potentially the worst offender there for having, completely changed it. Maybe what we'll do, Joe, is the weekend before, or rather the day before the tournament happens, we'll update everybody with your absolute final. This is what you'll be using tomorrow army list.
I think what we'll do is we'll do it when we're at Warhammer World on Friday, so 300 miles away from my house.
Yeah.
So I can't.
I'll bring the cameras and the recording equipment. It will be glorious. Yeah. But there we go.
The problem is that we're at Warhammer World, so Joe could just easily pop into the store and just be like, right, I'll just buy this quickly, and then somebody can assemble it, and then we can paint it and have a little production line.
You say that because there is a big barrier to entry for Joe doing that, and that would be...
having anything that resembled money. I just sit outside Forge World, pawning at the glass. Too sad to walk through.
Yeah. With puppy dog eyes, going, please.
Yeah. He's
gonna pity on me.
He's gonna turn up with his daughter in a pram and start trying to mysteriously hide bit boxes underneath her. Like, come on, dear.
Don't tell them before we get there.
Well, there you go. For all those guys who actually work at Warhammer World listening to this, I mean, why? There are so many better podcasts than this. But nonetheless, yeah, look out for Joe. He's on the rob.
Anyway, on that note, let's move on. So, Tim,
yes.
So how many tournaments have you been to before? Is this going to be first, or be better?
This is going to be, I would say, my first proper tournament. I did go to a Kill Team sort of tournament back last year when it was I think it was called Kill Team, but it was before the relaunch of it all.
Was this for Shadows of Armageddon?
It was just before that. It was just before Shadow War.
The previous Kill Team.
Yeah. The previous Kill Team. Yeah, I just had a small scout force for that, and it did pretty well. But there was only I think 15 people that were actually in the tournament because it was combined with like an open day kind of thing. So yeah, this will be my first proper tournament.
Oh, didn't you do Warhammer Fest? Didn't you do the tournament there as well?
No, I just turned up and just looked at all the pretty models and stuff. I just happened to bump into you guys as well.
Because I assumed you'd played Dan in a game.
Oh no. I know Dan through the Windsor store.
Ah, okay.
That's true. That is the common denominator. The old Windsor store.
The old Windsor store.
The old Windsor store.
Cool. I guess on that note, do you want to talk us through your list?
Sure.
Got.
Yeah, I'll tell you what I've got, and then you can rip it apart. So I am running Tyranids, as we've all spoken about, and it's made up of 2 detachments, one being Kronos and one being Kraken. I'll go through the Kronos one first. So this is a battalion detachment, and the Kronos High Fleet adaptation is re-rolling ones to hit if you did not move in the movement phase for shooting. And then for the 2 HQ choices, you've got the Hive Tyrant with wings and 2 Devourers and Brain Leech Worms. And then you've got a Neuronthrope with, he's just a Neuronthrope, but he is the Warlord. just sitting at the back, giving support to some of the heavy support guys. And then on top of that, you've got a set of Ripper Swarm.
Sorry, Tim. What's his warlord trait?
His warlord trait actually is Soul Hunger, which is, let me just get it up quickly.
I hope you're talking about the rules there, Tim.
Yeah. I am talking about rules. Basically, whenever an enemy psyker fails a psychic test within 18 inches of the warlord, they suffer D3 mortal wounds.
It's not bad. But did you say he's going to be at the back?
Yeah, he is going to be at the back. But to be honest, if I found with my playstyle, if I put my warlord on like my Hive Tyrant, I become really conservative with him. And with the Hive Tyrant, I just want to throw him about. So
yeah, that makes sense.
The Neuronthrope's only like 70 points, and he's just going to be in a little bubble. So that was my thinking.
So there's no like sneaky warlord traits where you can regain command points or do anything like that in Tyranids, right?
No, we're not that cool.
Not that cool.
Fortunately not.
Poor old Tyranids.
I know, we're not that blessed. Anyway, continuing on. So yeah, one unit of Ripper Swarms, and then we've got a unit of Tyranid Warriors armed with Death Spitters and Lash Whip and Bone Swords, and a Barbed Strangler. And then another set of Tyranid Warriors with exactly the same loadout except for a Venom Cannon, just to take down some more elite units, really. And then in the elite slot, we've got a unit of Hive Guard with Impaler Cannons, so that they can hide behind cover and shoot at anything. And then for the heavy support, we have an Execrane, a Morlock, and then a Tyrannofix with a Rupture Cannon. Again, to sit at the back and just give that high damage against those annoying pesky tanks that sit at the backfield. So at least I've got something to shoot at them on first turn.
That's the big anti-tank gun that
yeah.
Because the other one, is it a flamer type weapon?
Yeah, it's the acid spray one where you can move forward and it's got like an 18-inch range and it's 2d6. It's definitely viable, without a doubt. With the, I want to say meta, but I don't really know a lot. But because there's like knights and tanks and things on the field, I just want to have something that can actually do a dent to it. And if you don't move, you get to fire twice. And with the re-rolling ones, it makes it a bit more viable to take. It is only heavy on the Rupture Cannon 10.
I know, the toughness on the Beastie.
Oh, and the Beastie?
Carrying him, yeah.
6. Oh, no, 7. Sorry. No, toughness 8. I apologise.
Well, toughness 8 is good, because like most knight weapons are actually strength 7 and below. So they'll have a lot of... They will struggle to deal with it.
Isn't there rapid-fire battle cannon strength 8 there, right?
Yeah.
It is, but no one really... I don't really see many people using it. Just because it's unreliable.
No, it's true. That is true. I mean, admittedly as well, though, the Paragon Gauntlet or Thunder Gauntlet, whatever you want to call it, depending on if you use the relic one, is strength 16. So that one.
But if it's in combat with a Paragon Gauntlet Gallant, it's game over anyway.
Yeah, absolutely, absolutely. It doesn't matter what you are, you're pretty dead in that situation. Because that's the thing with NIDs right across the board is that they're actually, because they don't really ever have tremendous saves, they're just high wound, high toughness, right?
Yep, very correct.
Yeah, and a lot of these... Oh, sorry, Tim, carry on, mate.
No, go on.
I was going to say, and a lot of these guns that you're firing are like majoritively strength 8 as well, right? Because there's actually quite high strength behind these weapons.
Yeah. The baseline is generally strength 5. There's nothing really below that.
Wow.
Yeah, so this is definitely more of a shooting army. Just to finish it off, you've got a Harpy with 2 Stranglethorn cannons, and then going on to the Patrol Detachment, which is the Kraken one, which means I get to roll 3 dice when I advance and pick the highest. I've got a Broodlord in that with a unit of 16 Gene Stealers, and that's sort of my first turn charging, heavy hitting unit, and then I just try and, I hope that the rest of the army will just pick things off and capture victory points where I can, really.
That's cool. So you're not intending on deep striking the Gene Stealers?
No. So the only things that are going to deep strike are the Morlock, which is pretty useless, but because of points, me and Dan spoke about this, and it would be cool to put a Trigon in there. But a Morlock's 105 points and a Trigon's 169 base. And so to fit him in, I would also have to drop a few Gene Stealers as well, which means I lose that sort of impact. Like, Dan's played me in the past, and maybe you guys have played Gene Stealers as well, when they've been in like packs of 8 or 10. They're so like glass cannon that they just get shot off the board if they're not in a big blob.
Yeah, that totally makes sense.
And they are scary as well. Oh, sorry, Phil.
I was just going to say, yeah, the more you got, the more survivable they're going to be for that turn 1.
Yeah.
And
that
really,
5 up in run only goes so far across the board, so.
Yeah, and realistically, I guess it's like even if they don't survive, they're just a distraction for keeping your other stuff on the board a bit longer.
Yeah, very much so. So the way the army works is I've got my Hive Tyrant and my Rift Swarm and my Morlock to be a distraction, if anything, as well as the Harpy as well. Like, I really don't care about the Harpy. If it gets its points back, that's great, but if not, meh, all right. The Broodlord and Gene Stealers, yeah, as I said, I'm trying to get that first turn charge off with the stratagem, which lets me, I think it's 2 command points. I get to use my advance roll and double it and add that to my movement. So potentially I've got a move of 20 inches on the first turn.
Wow.
Yeah.
Would that patrol not be better taken as Gene Stealer Cult? So if they got into trouble, you could return them to the shadows and then pop up somewhere else.
Oh, quite possibly. Haven't really looked into it though.
Yeah.
Gene
So
Stealer Cult's
pure strain Gene Stealers.
Yeah.
Gene Stealer Cult's an interesting one though, isn't it? Because it's still without a codex at this moment in time. So if it was miraculously to come out in the next fortnight or whatever, which, I mean, or the next 3 weeks, which isn't incredibly likely, but if it did come out, there's probably something to think about. But I think because obviously they would then, Tim wouldn't get access to that roll 3d6, pick the highest stratagem, or is it it's a benefit of that particular strain, right? Right, Tim?
Yeah, it's the Kraken High Fleet adaptation.
That's the words I couldn't find. Yeah. So I think that's the thing with that side of things, although I think you've got a good point there, Joe, on the Gene Stealer side of it. I mean, Gene Stealers, I mean, obviously, you know, it's Tim, we've had this conversation, and you know it yourself, they're not the most competitive thing in the world currently, which is a damn shame, because Gene Stealers, like a Terminator, is a super iconic 40k unit that probably deserves better than what it's got right now, but at the end of the day, I can vouch that it does take you by surprise when that big 16-man unit runs across the board and charges into something turn 1. It can be very devastating, and as long as Tim has that element of surprise on his hands, I think he might catch a lot of people off guard with the sheer level of mobility combined with the aggressive nature of that unit. So yeah, I mean it's got viability for sure. The problem you're going to have, Tim, is if someone goes first on you or just seizes on you or whatever happens, you know, that unit's just going to get blown away without really any. Because you're always going to have to commit them to the front of your army, right?
Yeah, very much so. Like, I think that's just very true throughout the game. And you mentioned this in your other podcast. It's just, if you don't get that first turn, it does make it more difficult. I was going to use the chapter approved tactic of, is it 2 CP to give you +1 to your cover save even if you're out in the open?
It just gives you a cover save even if you're out in the open, but you have to be in your deployment zone as well. That's always something to remember about that.
Do Tyranids have any access to any stratagems that make their units like an additional -1 to be hit?
No, but there are, well, actually, not off the top of my head, I don't want to say 100%, but there are psychic powers that do it. So I can put a psychic power on my Broodlord, and I'm tossing up between Catalyst. Is it Catalyst? Catalyst, which is a 5-up feel no pain, or I think it's is it the horror, where you can put that on an enemy unit where they're -1 to hit on ranged weapons.
Okay.
So isn't there a few units that give the spore aura that give -1 to hit?
Yeah, there's the Venomthrope and the Malanthrope. The Venomthrope's an elite. Well, it was an elite slot, and the Malanthrope's HQ choice.
Because the Malanthrope's the Forge World one, right?
Yeah.
Yeah, that's a really nice model.
Yeah, it's a lovely model. I think back in the day, what was it? It was 7th edition list was like High Tyrants and Malanthropes or something.
Yeah, it was interesting that Tyranid sort of had their heyday earlier in the year when everyone was spamming like 8 flying High Tyrants at tournaments, and then they introduced that rule of 3, and then you haven't seen Tyranids at the top of the table ever since.
I think Tyranids have a lot of really interesting tricks up their sleeve, but they're very tricky, and even then, to win with those kind of tricky tactics, you're talking about particular matchup situations. So the stuff that always I hear people talking about, and I'm quite impressed with, is the Spore Mine kind of denial tactics that a lot of people use, where they basically use biovores to spit out a bunch of spore mines to basically fill the board up, and then they utilize that unit to essentially pen in or bottleneck in units into specific areas, and then go about tackling with them that way. Or they use those units to stop things being able to come in from reserves via what we would traditionally call deep strike, but the various different versions of things that allows you to place a model within 9 inches of something else, or just outside of, rather. So yeah, that's the thing with Tyranids. I think there's lots of like tricky things. I think we were talking before we started recording about some guy who's taking 153 Ripper Swarms to events these days or something. Was that
the madman?
I don't know. I think he actually isn't really taking them to tournaments, but is like a narrative player, and had just posted a picture up on the Tyranid group on Facebook, and it just looks quite mad, the amount of Ripper Swarms he's taken, because it was like 1,600 points or something.
Crazy.
Worth of Rippers, which is pretty insane.
Absolutely mental. I mean, that's the thing. I mean, there are things. I mean, me and Tim were talking about it as well, like the idea of having 30 Gaunts with Devourers popping up behind a Trigon, firing off whatever it is, like 160 shots or whatever they are. Not 160. It's something bonkers though. It's like
it'll be 120, and you could do that twice.
Yes, that's the word.
Stratagem.
That's the numbers I couldn't quite reach. And don't they get like a reroll to wound or something if you take them in 30-man units or whatever, a 30-man blob?
Quite possibly.
No, they get
because I never play them. I never look at their stat sheet.
yeah. But that's something like when you look at Termagants in conjunction with that, the idea that you could have this big unit of Termagants just come in and shoot up the place and then shoot something else in the same turn. It's that to me seems like the stuff that's got potential in that army list. But some of the more kind of poster boy units for the Tyranids, like obviously the Flying Hive Tyrants had their moment in the sun, but that got taken away from them the minute you could only have 3 of them. And then the Gene Stealers, I just don't think, again, 40k or Games Workshop have had Gene Stealers right for a long time, but I think, again, that comes down to how the game works currently. I feel like Gene Stealers should be more devastating. Like, if you told me a Gene Stealer
I don't know. I think they're pretty... People are playing them in this edition, whereas I'm pretty sure in 7th edition, like, no one took them because they just were awful. And then I was going to say the Pure Strain Gene Stealers were really good. I think in 7th edition, maybe. And then, the regular ones aren't as good as those ones, but... I think they're definitely better in 8th edition than they were in 7th.
I'd say they're definitely in 8th edition. I remember running them in 7th, and they were just even more appalling. Like, they hardly ever got into combat because everybody would just shoot them off. For some reason now, they actually make it across the board, which is quite nice. But when they hit, they hit hard because it's 4 attacks per Gene Stealer if they're +10, and then you got +1 to hit from the Broodlord, so they're hitting on 2s now, and then 6s are AP4. It's great.
Yeah, pretty good.
Yeah.
I mean, that's not anything to be disappointed by for sure. What do you think, Joe? You've been awfully quiet. You still here?
Yeah, I'm still here.
What do you think of gene sealers these days, Joe? Come on.
Get
involved.
I'm pretty scared of them. Unless you go first turn, then you gun them all down because they're pretty soft. And because of like the size of the units people run them in, they're really good. Like for first turn, just tying up your opponent, especially if they don't bring enough screening units or they leave gaps between their screening units because of the speed and the distance they can cover. They can slip between those lines, and then against like a guard player, just tap all of these Lehman Russes and just take them out of the game for a turn or two. They're super effective, like not just for killing stuff, but for shutting down your opponent's forces.
There you go.
Yeah.
How do you think you're going to get on at the tournament then, Tim? What's your prediction? Are you going to win a game?
Hopefully, I'd like to win a game. I'm aiming for 2, win 2, maybe draw 1, lose 2.
Oh, there you go. Bold
That's
prediction.
what I tend to aim for.
Sorry, Phil.
That's what I tend to aim for. Like win at least 2, and then try to lose as little as possible. So it invariably will be maybe get 1 draw in and then lose the other 2. So very middle of the road.
Yeah. I don't want to undersell me, but I don't want to oversell it as well.
Well, if you can, by some miraculous turn of events, secure 3 wins and a draw, you're likely to qualify for the finals off the back of that. But you could potentially, technically achieve a qualification status with 3 wins and a lot of nice votes for your nice painted stuff and favourite games and so on. But yeah, who knows as it goes.
Yeah, that's what I'm hoping for, is the favourite game votes for sure.
You never know though, Tim. You've taken something so uniquely different that is completely out of kilter with what most people would call the meta, that maybe you found the perfect counter without even realising it.
This could be it. This could be it.
You're going to turn up and you're going to smash all those orc players who are going, I've got all these boys, and you go, okay, it's all these gene sealers. Oh, they're all dead. Oh God.
Oh my God, what just happened? It'll be great if that's how it turns out. Oh, I'll be loving life. But we all know it's not. We all know it's going to be 3 Hemlocks Dan and all the killer cans in the world floating about, and Imperial Knight lists and possibly custodes. That's what I'm prepared to face. How I do against them.
Your army's going to be putting out a lot of mortal wounds, isn't it? Though.
Yeah, a bit through psychic, but not a lot. It's not as much as you'd think. Like the Morlock does mortal wounds, the Hive Tyrant will do mortal wounds, the Neuranthrope, the Harpy.
So hardly anything at all.
Yeah, not a lot. Don't know what you're talking about, Joe.
Absolutely, brilliant.
Oh, there goes.
What was that?
I was going to say, there goes the microwave. If you heard
you got that microwave going off in the background.
Yeah.
Amazing.
This is a victory.
Any more questions for dear old Tim and his lovely army?
None from me. It sounds like a pretty sort of a balanced and interesting list. It's not too shooty and it's not too close combat. So good mix, which is sort of what you want from the Tyranid list, I think.
Yeah,
I think you'll do quite well because of how the game is in its current state. Like no one's really knowing what to expect from the orc list, and I think a lot of people are going to change how their lists currently run to deal with them. So I think armies like Tyranids now are going to be able to slip through the gaps and secure some big wins.
I'm hoping for that sneaky little win here and there.
Yeah.
I'm hoping my shooting will pay off in the end. So yeah, we shall see. But I'm going to have fun either way. I don't really care. As long as I get to roll dice and move models about a tabletop, I'm happy. So,
I think the good thing is for you though, man, is you've got an army that's active in every phase. It's effective in all kind of scenarios. It's varied and versatile and interesting. You've got stuff in there that can answer most questions that get thrown your way. okay, yeah, sure, there are certain much more efficient units than, say, the Morlock that might probably not do anything special for you during the process. But you never know, right? I mean, that could be the unit that comes away being your MVP at the end of it all. It's really difficult to know. And again, Orcs will probably feature quite heavily at Heat 3 because Orcs have numbers and they amass victory points really quickly. In this game system that is the Warhammer World Events system, Orcs do super well because essentially, without meaning to, the people who play Orcs tend to swamp the board, control all the victory points, and then proceed to have a game last only 3 turns because their army can only slow play. And that's not to say that they're doing it on purpose. It's just to say that that's a fact of how the army runs. So any army that could have tabled that Orc army never gets a chance because it just doesn't go that way. So that's where the Orc army really comes into its own. But having an equal kind of, well, not equal, but having a similar level of kind of body count combined with damage output. If they've got a Morkanaut or a Gorkanaut or even a Stomper, you're probably going to have answers to those with the shooting. You've got really good answers to the boys if you can charge into them turn 1. So yeah, I think you'll be surprised actually that you probably do quite well. I think you should very comfortably expect to get 2 wins away. But again, you can never tell in these situations. There's 120 players at this event, so you've got 119 possible opponents in the first game, and it's just going to be luck of the draw from there on in, right?
Yeah, it really is. Like, you never know what you're going to face. Like, I could face some really fluffy lists, or I could face all the metas in the world and just be like, okay, it's going to be like that.
Absolutely. It can go that way. Well, I think that pretty much wraps up this episode, guys. Thank you very much, as always, for listening to this, the Lookout Sir 40k podcast. This has been episode 9, and we really, really appreciate you listening. Obviously, for those of you who are able to do so, please go and check out previous episodes on either YouTube, Spotify, iTunes, all the different places where we put stuff. Consider looking and seeing what we're doing on Instagram. Joe, what are we doing on Instagram? Have we done anything? What are we doing?
Not on this day or yesterday, possibly nothing the day before. But
obviously, taking into consideration that this day, when you say that, is Saturday.
Yeah, although we might have done something, but I'm intending on kind of doing a road to heat-free kind of thing, and we're gonna put up some pictures of the stuff that we're working on. For Tim's sake, it's literally just going to be what he's done because he's so smug in his completion.
I'm a little bit smug.
Yeah. Tim, you've got an Instagram, haven't you?
Yeah, fickle_brush.
There you go. People can check it out direct without having to wait a week for Joe to do something.
I'll put that in the comments, or not the comments, sorry, the description below in YouTube anyway, for those of you listening on Spotify or whoever else on iTunes. You won't see that, but actually no, I think I can add that to those descriptions. I'll add it to all the descriptions, along with a timestamp that says where we start doing stuff, because I saw someone grumbling at us last episode that we didn't do that, so we should have done that as well. Although obviously this is a bit retrospective now, because I'm saying this at the end. If you've got all the way to the end, you know we did that because it was there for your reference, unless of course you're not on YouTube. Anyway, I digress massively. Tim, thanks so much for joining us, buddy. Looking forward to spending the weekend together. It should be an absolute blast.
It's going to be awesome. Thanks for having me.
It's all right, mate. It's an absolute pleasure. So if no one else has any more to say, anybody?
All good.
Beautiful. Then in which case, guys, thank you very much for listening to episode 9 of the Lookout Sir 40k podcast. We can't wait. Next episode is 10. What a milestone.
Woohoo!
10.
Can we get cake?
Well, we can get cake if you want. Joe, can you get us cake?
I can. And sponge fingers and party rings.
Ooh, this
Brilliant.
is exciting. I mean, I can, for once, maybe I should take responsibility for something rather than constantly just saying, hey, Joe, sort this out for us, would you? Come on. Maybe I should talk to someone and see if I can.
And I'll be like, I'll write it down.
You'll write it down. Hang on, forgive me. That's me making the sort of noises you make, Joe. Recurring theme. We're calling it back. He's not.
He's not. It's character assassination, this.
This is terrible. But yeah, episode 10. And we're almost, I mean, right now, at the point of recording, we have 92 subscribers on YouTube. We're almost at 100. What a milestone that will be. We can make memorable, someone say that word, I can't say it.
Memorable?
Well, no, I was going to go, no, memorial. No, not memorial. Oh, bloody hell, I don't know. Anyway, we're going to do, we could get some cakes to go well done on 100 subscribers and 10 episodes, because we could have 100 subscribers by episode 10. Could you imagine that? What a world. Triple figures. Man.
That's exciting stuff.
Exactly, man. We're catching you up, Phil, on Beyond the Tabletop. We're almost getting
don't
there.
go on about that. Don't go on about that.
What, don't go on about Beyond the Tabletop? Do we not talk about that here? Leave that alone.
Of course we can, but you say it all the time, and it just makes me sound like I'm a big egotistical maniac.
No, you're not a big egotistical maniac at all. I like plugging Beyond the Tabletop. I think
You're
you should
just
check
a
out what you
maniac.
do. Exactly. We plugged Tim's Instagram. We can plug your YouTube channel and or Instagram and or website and or your Facebook page.
Exactly, I've got them all.
Got it all,
And
all
on
covered.
Twitter.
It does have. Do you have Twitter as well?
I do, and I use it occasionally, not as much as any of the others, because it just tends to feed like my Instagram posts. But then I do tend to reply and message people on there as well.
There you go. Check it all out. Makes me feel bad that I don't have any unique kind of social media platforms that I utilise for this. I just do this. This is all I have. This is it and nothing else. Joe, you've got an Instagram channel as well, haven't you?
I do. It's called Subtle Painting.
We should start plugging all these things moving forwards. But, if someone's actually kept on listening to this podcast by this point as well, thank you very much for that. That's really nice. This has probably gone on more than it ever should have done. But that has been episode 9. Thank you very much for listening. We look forward to you joining us again on episode 10. Thanks very much, everyone. Bye-bye.
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 Cheerio.
Who said cheerio? What is that?
You've deviated.
You've deviated. Was that you, Tim?
It was.
Mate, you're never coming back. Never.
Ninja.
Never. Gone. Be gone. No, never.